Chapter 195. It's really you. Dongfang Rui recognized Mammy Li at a glance. He had dreamed about the scene when Mammy Li and Su Yun left Yunjing many times. Even though it had been more than 10 years, Dongfang Rui still felt very familiar. Mammy Li wiped her tears and bowed to the ground. She said, "Prince, Li Xiaozui is back. Get up." Dongfang Rui let go of Su Zipei and directly jumped off the platform to help Mammy Li up. He said, "What happened that year? Tell me in detail." The sudden appearance of Mammy Li shocked Zhu Yan and Su Zipei. They didn't expect that the maid who sold herself to the Su family was originally a servant in the Lord Rui's mansion. Ling Qinglan said at the right time, "Lord Rui, I found the personal maid of Su Zipei after many inquiries. What do you want to ask? Mammy Li will tell you everything she knows. But you'd better deal with the current affairs first and then make a plan." Dongfang Rui tightened his lips and stared at Mammy Li. He said, "Mammy Li, tell me, is Su Zipei my biological daughter?" At this moment, everyone held their breath and waited for Mammy Li's answer. Su Zipei and Zhu Yan were so angry that they wanted to kill Mammy Li with their eyes. Zhu Yan even began to look for the mysterious woman in the crowd. She hoped that she could take action again and make Mammy Li speechless forever. Seeing this scene, Wu Bin immediately approached Mammy Li stealthily and looked around with vigilance. The woman in green who hid in the crowd scolded "rubbish" in a low voice. She put away the hidden weapon in her hand and left without hesitation. Wu Bin and Ling Qinglan defended together, so she couldn't succeed. "Prince. Su Zipei is Mrs. Zhu's biological daughter. When I fainted on the roadside, Mrs. Zhu took the little miss away. Then the jade pendant was taken away by her and left to Su Zipei. The little miss has suffered a lot these years. It's all my fault." After Mammy Li wailed, she was choked with sobs. Dongfang Rui's pupils shrank and gradually turned red. In this way, Zhu Yan and Su Zipei were not his close people, but the culprits who made his daughter suffer. Su Zipei knelt on the ground with a thud, and the pearls in her hair scattered all over the ground. Her little face was lifeless, and tears flowed down, ruining her makeup. She was about to become Dongfang Zipei. Why didn't God open his eyes and let Mammy Li stand out at this time? At this moment, Zhu Yan had no time to care about her daughter. She retreated to the back of the crowd and took off her luxurious clothes. It was a big crime to deceive the Lord. Even if Su Li pleaded this time, Lord Rui would not let her go. But she was found by Wu when she ran a few steps. Li's face. Zhu Yan and Su Zipei were caught by Rui Li and said, "Li's Li." Before Zhu Yan could react, she was pressed to the ground by the guards of the prince's mansion and could not move. Li's SS Li, and Su was shocked. Li's S bin Zipei Fong Ping. Su Li Su said. Li's Ming Li and Li. The Li is that the Fong. Yun is. Li is. Li is. Ming. Everyone left sensibly, but they were all excited in their hearts. Yunjing City would be more lively tomorrow than before. In the blink of an eye, all the guests left. Ling Qinglan and Ling Li also left. Only Mammy Li stayed in the mansion. Dongfang Rui helped Mammy Li, who knelt on the ground. He was about to take her to the room. Mammy Li was stunned and looked back. But Su Li was not in the mansion. "Little miss." Mammy Li screamed and ran to the door. Dongfang Rui's expression changed slightly. He followed her immediately. Mammy Li went out of the door and saw Su Li. She shouted and ran after her, "Little miss, why did you leave?" Dongfang Rui saw Su Li again. He was stunned. It turned out that everything went back to the original point. Lingli was right. The daughter he pointed out to her by chance was really his biological daughter. But when he saw Su Li's cold face, he couldn't help but feel sad. Yes, just like her, he didn't care about the so-called dignitaries. How could Yun's daughter be as greedy for fame and fortune as Su Zipei? He was immersed in the fake warmth of father and daughter, but he didn't want to think of the truth. Mammy Li looked at the father and daughter and didn't say anything for a long time. She consciously kept silent and waited for the development of the situation. I'm disappointed in you. After a long time, Su Li finally said. What she said made Dongfang Rui feel cold. She said, Mammy said that my mother was a genius in the wisdom circle. Her husband should be calm all the time and have excellent planning ability. But you just listened to one side of the story. You don't want to think more. There are many loopholes, but you don't want to doubt more. Are you tired because you haven't found your biological daughter for many years? So, you are eager to find a daughter. Dongfang Rui's face was pale. He took a few steps back. He was heartbroken. But he couldn't refute every word of Su Li. Miss, Mammy Li murmured. She was sad. She didn't want to see the relationship between the father and the daughter become so cold when they just met. Su Li turned her head and suddenly smiled. She looked at Dongfang Rui and continued, Mammy, don't worry. I'm not angry. I'm just telling a fact. If the dignified Lord Rui is just like this, I don't want the so-called recognition. Li, you, Dongfang Rui clutched his chest and sighed. Don't call me Li. Su Li's eyes suddenly became fierce. She said, before I marry you, you are not qualified to call me that. Dongfang Rui's lips moved, but he didn't say anything. Wu Bin couldn't stand it. But he didn't do things well before, so he was too ashamed to blame Su Li. He could only beg, little. Miss Su, it's all my fault. It's not the Lord's fault. The Lord has never stopped tracking down the murderer. For so many years, the Lord has not married a princess under the pressure of the Empress Dowager. Even if you don't want to come back for the time being, don't be so decisive. The Lord's health. Wu Bin. Dongfang Rui interrupted him. He looked at Su Li and said slowly, it's wrong. Su Li, I don't beg you to come back or meet my father. I just beg you, to give me a chance to redeem myself. For your mother, I won't be a coward anymore. Then, Dongfang Rui handed the jade pendant in his hand. His dignified face gradually showed a pleading expression. Su Li gently patted Dongfang Rui's hand and shook her head. She said, there's no proof. I never believe in any promise. When you know the truth about my mother's death, I may consider accepting it. Then, Su Li glanced at Mammy Li and said, Mammy Li, you stay in the Lord's mansion to tell him what happened that year. I'm going back. Little miss. Mammy Li called her. Seeing that Su Li didn't turn around, she could only sigh. The little miss was still as stubborn as before. When Dongfang Rui heard the agreement that Su Li said, he saw a glimmer of hope that Su Li could go home. He immediately took Mammy Li back to the Lord's mansion in a hurry. He didn't forget to order, Wu Bin, send someone to the affiliated school to protect her. If anything happens to her, I will hold you responsible. Yes, Lord. I will never make mistakes this time. Wu Bin nodded repeatedly. He had made mistakes again and again. If the miss was in danger at this moment, he would rather die for Su Li. Tonight, many people were sleepless. Mammy Li and Dongfang Rui talked by candlelight at night. They knew that Su Li was tortured by Zhu Yan when she was a child. She was so thin that she didn't look like a human. They knew that Su Li relied on her own efforts to get a trace of vitality. Behind the glory of the so-called lecturer of the affiliated school, there was endless bitterness and suffering. He couldn't imagine how Su Li, at such a young age, managed to survive alone. Dongfang Rui suddenly felt that Su Li's indifferent temperament became excusable. On the contrary, he was too naive to fantasize about his daughter's ideal character. When Dongfang Rui was still learning about Su Li's past, the news that the Lord Rui's mansion made a big mistake blew through every corner of Yunjing City like a tornado. The topic about Lord Rui and the Su family became more and more popular. Even in the remote Zhouyue winery, many drinkers sat in the winery and talked loudly. After the business was closed, the proprietress cleaned up the dishes and kept watching. When the sun was setting, she finally saw her husband come back. She frowned and was about to get angry. Xian Jingzhou quickly begged for mercy. "Honey, wait. Don't fight. I didn't stay idle for a day and a night. I went to do business." Bang! The proprietress sat at the table, and the ground shook. She said fiercely, "Say it." Xian Jingzhou closed the door of the winery and said, "Last night, I successfully sneaked into the Lord Rui's mansion. What happened that night was really shocking. Can you guess what happened?" The proprietress took a kitchen knife and picked her nails. She sneered and said, "Are you going to tell me that Su Zipei and her mother joined hands to deceive Lord Rui?" "Honey, how do you know?" Xian Jingzhou stared at her. The proprietress was so angry that she laughed and said, "This matter has spread all over Yunjing City early in the morning. How do you ask me how I know it?" "Well, Xian Jingzhou, where did you go today? If you don't tell me the reason, I won't let you go." Hey! Hey! Don't be angry. I was really delayed by something." Xian Jingzhou pulled up his sleeves and showed a black hand. He made a gesture. The proprietress's expression instantly became serious. She pulled the door bolt and didn't clean up the dishes. She directly took Xian Jingzhou to the underground adytum and helped him bandage the wound. "Hey, be gentle." Xian Jingzhou was in pain and gasped, "I did sneak into the Lord Rui's mansion yesterday, but I didn't hear it. After Yun's personal maid appeared, I found that someone around me revealed the intention to kill. After Wu Bin noticed it, the person quickly restrained his smell and retreated. I chased after him." Slap! The proprietress bandaged the wound and patted it hard. Xian Jingzhou screamed in pain. "Honey, you are going to murder your husband." The proprietress said bitterly, "Don't you know what you are capable of? If they outnumber you, aren't you courting death by chasing after them so rashly?" Although the proprietress's tone was harsh, the concern revealed in her words could not be faked. Xian Jingzhou smiled embarrassedly and scratched his head. He said, "I dare not do it next time. But I was lucky this time. That person was not as good as me. After I caught up with her, I fought with her for a few moves. But your moves were big, so you were plotted against, right?" The proprietress rolled her eyes and said, "Fortunately, although the poison on the hidden weapon is powerful, it is easy to detoxify it for people above the inborn realm. I didn't bring any weapons. Although the little girl's Xiangong level is high, her cultivation is not as good as mine. If I had a weapon, I would definitely be able to stop her." Xian Jingzhou still wanted to say a few more words, but he was scared by the proprietress's eyes. He quickly changed his words, "I won't dare to do it next time. Saving my life is the first priority." The proprietress replied softly and was silent for a moment. Suddenly, she hesitated and said, "I heard from those drinkers that Yun's daughter is Su Li. She didn't recognize Dongfang Rui. Now she lives in the affiliated school of the National Academy. Shall we go, Su Li?" Xian Jingzhou was refreshed and said, "The abbot of the Chan Mountain didn't lie to us. Yun's daughter really appeared. But at this time, we can't act rashly. Lord Rui will definitely send a large force to guard the affiliated school of the National Academy. If we break in, we will alert the enemy. Besides, Suli doesn't know our identity and may not be willing to cooperate with us. We'd better wait for the opportunity in secret. The proprietress hesitated for a while and finally nodded. Chapter 196. In the imperial study of the imperial palace of the Dahan country. A gray-haired old man was lying on a soft bed and taking a nap. He was dressed in a yellow robe and had a crown on his head. Although he looked old, he exuded boundless majesty, like a true dragon. He was the emperor of the Dahan country and the leader of the Dongfang family, Dongfang Shao. After a while, Eunuch Feng bowed and came in. He whispered in Dongfang Zhao's ear, "Your Majesty, the Eighth Lord wants to see you." Dongfang Shao raised his wrinkled eyelids and said unhappily, "What does he come for? Haven't I already followed his wishes and made an exception to let that wild girl marry into the Dongfang family?" Eunuch Feng waved his hand helplessly and said, "Your Majesty, something went wrong. The Eighth Lord was cheated. Now Zhu Yan and Su Zipei have been detained by the Supreme Judiciary." Dongfang Shao finally opened his eyes a little. Then he sat up straight with the help of Eunuch Feng and said, "In this case, let him come in." After a while, Dongfang Rui came in and saluted, "Brother." People said that he had a good relationship with the third brother, but they didn't know that the relationship between him and the third brother was the furthest. This so-called relationship was deliberately spread by the third brother in order to show his ability. However, because of such a rumor, he could easily get the consent of Dongfang Shao and let Su Zipei marry into the Dongfang family. Unfortunately, Su Zipei became Suli, things became much more complicated. "Third brother, you don't come for nothing. I have heard about the Su family. Since Su Zipei cheated, the Supreme Judiciary must punish her severely. I have told you before about the Dongfang family tree. Forget it." After hearing it, Dongfang Rui bowed his head and said, "Brother, I don't come for the family tree. I'll get straight to the point. The person who attacked Yun that year, Imperial brother actually knows who it is, right?" "What?" Dongfang Zhao's turbid eyes flashed with a glimmer of light. He said in a low voice, "Dongfang Rui, do you know what you are talking about?" "I know." Dongfang Rui looked straight at Dongfang Shao and didn't show any weakness. He said, "Brother, if you still care about your brotherhood, tell me who killed Yuner." "How dare you?" Dongfang Shao was furious. He stood up and scolded, "The elder brother is the father. Imperial mother and imperial father have both passed away. Is this how you speak to your third brother?" Plop. Dongfang Rui knelt down without saying anything. He lowered his head and said nothing. Dongfang Shao was moved. He pointed at Dongfang Rui for a long time, but didn't reprimand him. "Forget it, forget it. I won't forgive you if you offend me like this again." An hour later, Eunuch Feng saw that Dongfang Rui left angrily. He walked in slowly and saw that Dongfang Rui was frowning and resting. He couldn't help but worry, "Your Majesty, if you say so, Yunjing City will be in chaos." Dongfang Shao lay on the soft bed again and scolded with a smile, "You old servant, do you really think that I will impulsively tell him the murderer because of Eighth Brother's heartfelt words?" Eunuch Feng's expression changed slightly. "Then, the Wu clan has indeed become a little arrogant in recent years." Dongfang Shao closed his eyes and said slowly, but his words were full of bloodthirst. He said, "It's okay to let Eighth Brother kill the Wu clan spirit," and Dongfang Shao sneered and said, "Those stupid sons of mine really think that they can win by cooperating with a ninth-grade sect. As the sons of the Dongfang clan, they don't think about defending the family against external enemies and solving internal troubles. Instead, they invite a wolf into the house. They are a group of idiots." Eunuch Feng quickly lowered his head. At this moment, what he had to do was to listen. Being in the Emperor's company was like being with a tiger. If he talked nonsense, the consequences would be bad. In the past, the Dongfang clan and the Hehuan sect were no different. They were rootless duckweeds. If they were careless, they would be destroyed in the martial arts circle. After several generations of efforts, the Dongfang clan became the ruler of a country. Its status is comparable to that of the 8th grade sect. But Xing and others did compromise to cooperate with the Hehuan sect. How short-sighted they were. Speaking of this, Dongfang Shao suddenly opened his eyes and said, "So what? Since the 8th brother is willing to take action, I will take this opportunity to teach Xing and others a lesson. I will let them know what real power is." Eunuch Feng was in a cold sweat. The Emperor's simple answer actually involved so many intentions. It was really difficult to guess the Emperor's mind. He thought of Lord Rui, who left angrily and sighed in his heart. The most heartless was the Emperor's family. This saying was true no matter which dynasty it was in, it was applicable. Su Li stayed in the affiliated school of the National Academy recently and didn't go out. She wanted to go to the Linley building to have a look, but many people of the Lord's mansion were hiding around. In particular, Wu Bin's cultivation reached the inborn 6th hurdle, which was only 1 hurdle lower than hers. It was extremely difficult to deal with him. If she disappeared rashly, she would definitely be discovered. Fortunately, this situation didn't last for a long time. Wu Bin was called back by Dongfang Rui. A group of royal guards with low cultivation couldn't stop her. In the middle of the night, Su Li changed into night clothes and left the affiliated school. She rushed to the Linley building. But she met Fang Yuan on the way. They stood on the roof and looked at each other for a moment. Then Fang Yuan immediately went back. Since Su Li came, he didn't have to take risks in the affiliated school. When they arrived at the Linley building, Yin Xuedong opened the back door vigilantly. When she saw Fang Yuan and Su Li, she immediately breathed a sigh of relief. She patted her chest and said, "I was scared to death. How did you come so fast?" "I met them on the way." Fang Yuan explained and followed Su Li into the room. They went all the way to the underground adytum. "Where is Chu Qingning?" Su Li glanced at them and didn't see the face with a smirk all the time. She actually felt a little unaccustomed. "Su Li, I was just about to tell you." Yin Xuedong was happy and said, "Chu Qingning went outside the city to break through." Su Li slightly raised her eyebrows. That guy was so lucky to encounter the opportunity to break through the inborn realm. It is related to the winery next door. Thinking of the rumors in the city these days and the words that Chu Qingning asked her to convey, Yin Xuedong and Fang Yuan couldn't help but feel complicated. They always had doubts about Su Li's origin. Until now, they didn't know that Su Li was the princess of the Dehan country. Seeing their subtle expressions, Su Li raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "Why? Do you think that the position of princess can make me give up everything in front of me and go back with Dongfang Rui to recognize my ancestors?" Su Li, Yin Xuedong was moved and said, "If it is just because of us, you don't have to. It is not because of you." Su Li interrupted Yin Xuedong and said indifferently, "My goal is not to be a member of the royal family. You just need to keep the agreement between us and don't care about other things." Su Li's words were very heartless. But Fang Yuan and Yin Xuedong were not stupid. They naturally knew that Su Li dissociated herself from them because she didn't want them to have too much burden. Alas, Yin Xuedong sighed softly and didn't mention the previous things. She said, in addition to practicing, Qingning stayed underground every day to eavesdrop on the movements next door. He really heard something very shocking. He took this opportunity to find the opportunity to break through. He told me in a hurry and went outside the city to break through. What a lucky guy. What did he hear? Su Li shook her head and laughed. Before the age of 20, people had simple life experiences. It was not easy to break through the inborn realm. It was totally lucky to break through like Chu Qingning. Yin Xuedong looked strange and said, Su Li, the pair of seniors in the inborn realm next door seem to be your elders. Ha! Su Li was slightly stunned. Yin Xuedong continued, Chu Qingning heard that they always wanted to see you, but they couldn't find the opportunity. The proprietress seems to be the elder sister of a person named Xiaoyun. If I remember correctly, your biological mother seems to be called Su Yun. Fang Yuan also looked strange. Yin Xuedong kept them guessing and didn't want to say it a few days ago. In this way, weren't Xian Jingzhou and his wife Su Li's aunt and uncle? In that case, their previous efforts to rope in the two of them would have been in vain. Su Li was silent. She unconsciously recalled the events of the previous life. Unfortunately, the memory of the proprietress in the previous life was too little. She had no impression of how she died. Su Li, why don't we go to the next door to sound it out? Fang Yuan suddenly suggested. Su Li rubbed her eyebrows and waved her hand. She walked into the depth of the adytum and said, Don't act rashly and alert the enemy. The authenticity of the news has not been confirmed. It is not wise to go rashly. We will observe this matter for the time being. Tomorrow, you and I will go to see Chu Lu. The cold voice gradually faded away. Yin Xuedong was full of admiration and couldn't help but praise. This matter is clearly related to her relatives, but she did not lose her calm and still made the most accurate judgment. She deserves to be the person I admire. Seeing that Yin Xuedong was infatuated with Su Li, Fang Yuan shook his head and turned away. Calm. Why did he think that Su Li was more afraid? Just like, the closer you are to your hometown, the more timid you are. Her relatives were only separated by a wall, but she didn't have the courage to see them. At this moment, in the deepest part of the adytum, Su Li closed the stone door and took a deep breath. She sat down against the stone wall and thought deeply. Would the proprietress be her aunt, if so many years had passed? Xian Jingzhou and the proprietress had always been in Yunjing. Were they also there that night when her mother escaped from Yunjing? She wanted to ask clearly, but as Fang Yuan thought, she was afraid. She was afraid that the news Chu Qingning heard was just an illusion, like flowers in the mirror and the moon in the water. After seeing Chu Lu tomorrow, I will make a plan. Putting aside the distracting thoughts, Su Li's eyes became clear. She still had a lot of things to do. She could not avenge her mother and fulfill Ling Li's wish just by talking. She lit the stone lamp, and the light in the stone room was illuminated. 8 topless coffins came into view. The people lying in the coffins were the killers she had brought back from the hunting ground. At this moment, Su Li took a deep breath. As her eyes turned, a wisp of dead gray suddenly emerged from the bottom of her eyes. At the moment when the dead silence appeared, the 8 corpses lying in the coffins suddenly trembled, and then sat up straight from the coffins. Their eyes lit up. That was the green light emitted by the corpse puppet. Chapter 197. In the morning of the next day, Su Li disguised herself as a child. Fang Yuan also changed into a suit of fancy clothes and changed his appearance. He left the Lianli building and went to the Hongyan house. As soon as he stepped into the brothel, there were many prostitutes who dressed in revealing clothes and tried to attract customers. Good morning, child. Sir, come and play. I have been waiting for you for a long time. Fang Yuan's face was taut and his eyebrows were twitching. He was taught to focus on practice since he was a child and never touched these things. Today was the first time that he came to the brothel. Su Li saw Fang Yuan's expression and couldn't help but chuckle. She transmitted the sound in silence, relax. You don't really come to visit prostitutes. Take this brothel as your opponent. Acting skills are also the foundation of a person's strength. Compared with Chu Qingning, you are too serious. Hearing Su Li's words, Fang Yuan felt happy and natural. However, he felt uncomfortable to visit a brothel with Su Li in the early morning. When they came to the Hongyan house, Su Li was very anxious. She hurried to the procuress and said, "Mom, where is Miss Chu? I came over early today. She wouldn't be busy, right?" The procuress didn't remember what Su Li looked like, but she asked the same question every day. She immediately replied, "Oh, you are so impatient. But today, Su Shi is having a bad day. I'm afraid that she can't receive guests." Su Li was slightly shocked and remembered the agreement made by Chu Lu in advance. She immediately showed disappointment on her face and turned away. She didn't forget to turn back and tell the maidservant, "It's really unlucky. Mom, when Miss Chu recovers, you must inform me. There are other girls in the Hongyan house. What do you think?" "No, no, no. I want Miss Chu." "Well, take care, child." Fang Yuan showed a look of unlucky and followed Su Li away. But he didn't think about Chu Lu's strange behavior. He thought that Su Li was a girl. Why could she play the role of a prostitute so well? Could it be that this was the so-called acting talent? After Su Li left, the procuress stopped smiling and went upstairs. At this moment, there was a fat old man in a black robe in Chu Shi's room. There was a conspicuous scar on his face from his ear to his mouth. Every time the old man smiled, the scar would be exposed, which looked extremely horrible. Lady Chu is really popular in Yunjing City. At this moment, the old man with a knife scar was smiling at Chu Lu. Chu Lu covered her mouth and chuckled. She looked away and said, "Elder Dao, you are really good at joking. I am a prostitute. If I am not popular, how can I deceive those officials and nobles? Aren't I contributing to our sect? Looks like the sect master was right to send you here. In the past, you never said the words 'my sect.'" Elder Dao nodded slightly. He unscrupulously glanced at Chu Lu, who was wearing revealing clothes. He smiled meaningfully and said, "As long as you can satisfy me in these days when I am here, I will definitely put in a good word for you in front of the hierarch when I go back. At that time, the hierarch may be happy and teach you the marvelous martial arts of the Hehuan sect. Maybe you can become a core disciple of the Hehuan sect." If the words of the old man with a knife scar were heard by any slutty woman who was sincerely devoted to the Hehuan sect, she would be very happy. But Chu Lu was not. She only had one feeling now: nausea. Fortunately, her experience in these years was not in vain. Chu Lu didn't seem to have a bad sense of direction. Instead, she was pleasantly surprised with a trace of pity. She said, "Elder Dao's proposal is very attractive to me. But, Elder Dao, have you forgotten something? If Elder Dao also wants to suffer from the Hongchen powder, I have no objection." As soon as she said that, Elder Dao's face immediately changed. How could he forget that Chu Lu had the Hongchen powder that hierarch personally planted on her body? Although he might not be infected if he had intimate relations with her, he didn't want to take that kind of risk. Thinking of this, Elder Dao's face was full of bad luck. He looked terrible. After drinking the wine in the cup, he stood up and said domineeringly, "Hierarch ordered me to take the full moon and heartstrings. All the people of the Hehuan sect in Yunjing City must listen to my instructions. Lady Chu, I have to trouble you to collect intelligence these days. You don't need to care about other things." Then, Elder Dao left the room without looking back. The beauty was in front of him, but he couldn't kiss her. Why did he stay here? Seeing that he left the Hongyan house, Chu Lu breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't know when her clothes were wet. When Mr. Li suddenly came to find her, she was scared out of her wits. Fortunately, Mr. Li reacted very quickly and Elder Dao didn't notice anything unusual. Chu Lu pulled up her clothes and lowered her head. She looked gloomy. Because of the Hongshan powder, she was free from being polluted by Elder Dao. But she didn't feel happy at all. The so-called Hongshan powder was the poison of the stove planted by Hierarch himself. This kind of poison would break out every half a year. When it broke out, the whole body would be in great pain. It was as if the bones were burning. It was better to die than to live. Every time, if there was no medicine given by Hierarch, she would be tortured to death. Joining the Hehuan sect was just an expedient measure. Unexpectedly, Hierarch liked her and regarded her as his exclusive property. She didn't want to yield, so she was planted with the Hongshan powder by Hierarch. In the following years, every time the Hongshan powder broke out, she wanted to die. But the obsession in her heart made her survive in the dirty Hehuan sect. Relying on her intelligence, she took the opportunity to come to Yunjing. 10 years. 8 years have passed. Chu Lu clutched her chest and muttered to herself. Every woman who was planted with the Hongshan powder could only live for 10 years. Because in the 10th year, she, the stove, was like a ripe fruit that could be picked after being cultivated for many years in the eyes of Hierarch. At that time, she would be recalled to the Hehuan sect and become a sacrifice for Hierarch's great improvement in cultivation. At that time, she only heard from the women who were also planted with the Hongshan powder. Every woman who was used as a stove died miserably in the hands of Hierarch. Some people said that when the Hongshan powder broke out, the body would melt into blood and then be refined into elixirs by Hierarch. Some people said that after 10 years, the body of the poisoned would gradually die, but the wisdom would still be there. She would watch herself being swallowed by Hierarch little by little. It was extremely cruel. No matter what kind of death it was beyond the limit that normal people could bear. Therefore, almost all the women who were planted with the Hongshan powder at that time died. Only she was still alive. There were many restrictions on this kind of secret method of grafting cultivation. Only when the recipient had little resentment in her heart took the Hongshan powder for 10 years could it be regarded as a qualified medicine primer. Otherwise, Hierarch was likely to be disturbed by it and be possessed by the devil. Of course, Chu Lu was resentful. Her resentment was even stronger than anyone else's. But she didn't show it, so that Hierarch always thought that she was still kept in the dark. Hierarch still had the sweet dream of taking the Hongshan powder for 10 years. Her original idea was very simple. If she couldn't find the news of her brother, she would go back and give the Hierarch of the Hehuan sect a hard blow to avenge herself. But now, Mr. Li undoubtedly changed her idea a lot. Putting aside the distracting thoughts, Chu Lu thought of the agreement with Su Li before. But she was not anxious. Although Elder Dao came for the auction fair, he might send someone to monitor her. So, she had to be more cautious when meeting Mr. Li. Chu Lu waited patiently for a day. Elder Dao hurriedly took people out. She still dealt with the information presented by the spy as usual. After 3 days, Chu Lu finally confirmed that Elder Dao didn't send someone to monitor her. Instead, he focused on finding the disciples of the Lianshi cult. Then that night, she immediately put on the night clothes and rushed to the Linli building that Su Li mentioned for the first time. At this moment, in the dead of night, the back door of the Linli building was as dark as ink. Chu Lu was perturbed. She knocked on the door regularly in the dark. After a while, the back door opened quietly. At the same time, she heard the familiar voice of Mr. Li, "Come in quickly." There was no time to see the situation in the room. Chu Lu quickly flashed into the room. The back door was closed immediately. The alley became dark again. Chu Lu squinted her eyes and finally adapted to the sudden bright light. She saw that the person who opened the door for her was a girl. She seemed to be 17 or 18 years old, but she couldn't see through her cultivation. Chu Lu was slightly shocked. The people around Mr. Li were really very young and talented young men and women. After a few steps, Chu Lu saw the young man who had been in contact with her. She immediately saluted subconsciously. Chu Lu greets Protector Fong. Yin Xuedong covered her mouth and smiled silently. Su Li really liked to give them boring ranks. Only from this point, it could be seen that Su Li was the same as them. They were still peers who liked to play pranks. Fong Yuan was helpless, but he nodded expressionlessly. He pushed the door open and said, "The master has been waiting for you for a long time. Go in." Fong Yuan found that he said the word master many times. He seemed to be numb to the point that he didn't feel ashamed. Chu Lu took a deep breath and walked into the room. The door behind her was immediately closed. She was shocked. Suddenly, something flew towards her. She was nervous and slapped it to the ground. It made a crisp sound and the fragrance of wine assailed her nose. Chu Lu just calmed down from the shock and found that it was a glass of wine instead of a hidden weapon that flew to her. "This is the wine I brewed. You refused it without saying anything. It really makes me sad." Su Li came out in a simple cyan cloth and smiled brightly. Chu Lu suddenly saw Su Li. She was about to salute, but then she felt something wrong. Subconsciously, she stood up straight, and then she looked more and more shocked. "Did Mr. Li become shorter? Since you are here, don't be nervous. Sit down and talk." Su Li poured another glass of wine for Chu Lu and chuckled, "What you see is still not my true face. But this time, my height is real." Chu Lu took the glass carefully. She was still vigilant and didn't dare to drink. However, when she heard Su Li's big truth, she inevitably felt a little curious. Was Mr. Li born short or he was too young? Seeing that Chu Lu was always nervous, Su Li lost the intention to continue to ease the relationship. She decisively asked, "What happened in the Hongyan house?" Chu Lu immediately became serious. She habitually lowered her voice and said, "Elder Dao of the Hehuan sect came. Now, except for the Hongyan house, I can't mobilize other people in Yunjing City. Hierarch seems to want to rob the full moon and heartstrings. Even men will be tempted by that kind of treasure, let alone your hierarch, Yi Tian. She founded the Hehuan sect for her own selfish desire. If she doesn't rob the full moon and heartstrings, unless the old woman dies," Su Li said sarcastically. In the previous life, she often dealt with the Hehuan sect. Some people in the martial arts circle even jokingly called her and the hierarch of the Hehuan sect the double poisons of the martial arts circle. She was chased by the old woman for several years and paid a great price to kill her. Chu Lu listened quietly. It was the first time for her to hear the real name of the hierarch of the Hehuan sect. Chapter 198. Shaking her head, Chu Lu drove the face of the hierarch out of her mind. She was just a nobody. It was useless to think too much. "Ms. Li, although I was deprived of the command, I still know the personnel changes of the Hehuan sect. The previous plan doesn't need to be changed much." Chu Lu's eyes were shining and she was worried. The Hehuan sect had harmed her for many years. She really hoped that Su Li would continue to implement the plan and let the Hehuan sect suffer a big loss. Da-da-da, Su Li tapped the table with her fingertips. Chu Lu's hatred for the Hehuan sect couldn't be fake. Otherwise, the Hehuan sect wouldn't have such big news that shocked the martial arts circle in the previous life. It was the young woman who always looked nervous sitting in front of her. In the previous life, she exchanged her life for Yi Tian's serious injury and almost destroyed the Hehuan sect. Although it didn't succeed in the end, Chu Lu left a strong mark in the martial arts circle. She also made the Hongqian powder of the Hehuan sect a big joke in the martial arts circle. In Chu Lu's uneasy mood, Su Li finally said, "Of course, the plan should be implemented. However, it needs to be changed." Chu Lu was slightly stunned. In her opinion, the plan was perfect and there was no need to change it. "Do you have any news about the recent changes in the personnel entering the city?" Su Li didn't mention the change of the plan. Chu Lu didn't ask. She took the scroll out of her sleeve and said, "Recently, there are obviously more warriors entering the city from the gate of Yunjing. Most of them are not the Hehuan sect or the Lianshi cult, but a small force called the Yunj sect. Most of them come for the auction fair." Su Li's eyes flashed, but Chu Lu continued, "In addition to the personnel changes, there is another change that I am very concerned about. The 8th Lord, Dongfang Rui, changed his previous state of seclusion and became active recently. Because of various things happened between him and the Su family, there was a great uproar in the city. I was a little concerned, so I sent someone to monitor the 8th Lord's mansion. I found that the 8th Lord's mansion seemed to be reorganizing the troops these days." Speaking of this, Chu Lu took a deep breath and her voice became lower and lower. "The butler of the 8th Lord is called Wu Bin. He is the former commander of the Royal Guards. He has a high prestige in the Royal Guards. I suspect that the 8th Lord wants to revolt." Su Li said easily, but Chu Lu's face changed slightly. "Do you think so, Master?" "No." All kinds of thoughts flashed through Su Li's mind. The doubts left in the previous life seemed to be explained by Chu Lu. Another one was solved. Before that, did Lord Rui enter the palace? "How do you know?" Chu Lu said in a low voice, 8th Lord did enter the palace 3 days ago, the second day after the feast." "That's right." Su Li picked up the pen and paper beside the table. She first wrote Yunj, then Dongfang Rui, and then the emperor's name, Dongfang Shao. Chu Lu was scared. It was a big crime to write the emperor's name without authorization. Mr. Li didn't care about it at all. In the end, Su Li wrote the character Su, which represented Su Zipei. But because Chu Lu was the first character, she couldn't write the whole character, so she used the character Su instead. In her previous life, she had tried to kill Su Zipei more than once, but she failed every time. Because Su Zipei was always protected by someone. That person's cultivation was not as high as hers, but they cooperated tacitly and quietly. Their defense was airtight. Every time, Su Zipei was restrained. As time went by, more and more people came, and she had to retreat. Later, she investigated in many ways, but she didn't find such a person in the royal guards and the Wu family. It was another force. Before Chu Lu said Yunj, she always thought that those people were elites cultivated by Su Zipei. Now she suddenly realized. It was very likely that those people were from the Cloud Pavilion. Now the princes were fighting with each other secretly. Dongfang Shao was old and useless, and they were about to take the throne. It seemed that no one cared that Dongfang Shao was still the emperor. If she didn't see the force behind Dongfang Shao in the previous life, Su Li would also think so. But now, she was very clear that it was not the Yinma cult or any sect that was in charge in Yunjing City. It was always the Dongfang family. Any trivial thing that happened in Yunjing City would be collected and analyzed by the Dongfang family. What's more, even if the Dongfang family didn't take action, they would come to observe secretly. It seemed that Dongfang Rui was also very clear about this. So, for the agreement with her, he went to Dongfang Shao and seemed to get the answer. Thinking of this, Su Li tore off the paper and crushed it. She looked up and said, Chu Lu, go back and wait for the news. Lord Rui will not attack the imperial palace. But no matter who he attacks, it will inevitably cause chaos in the city. It will be an opportunity. Before that, pay close attention to the movement of the Hehuan sect. If it is urgent, I will find you in person. Chu Lu took a deep breath and her eyes lit up. It seemed that Mr. Li's plan was bigger than she thought. However, the more chaotic it was, the more opportunities she had to take action. At that time, she would have a chance to take revenge on the people of the Hehuan sect. Yes, Mr. Li. I will not let you down. Su Li said gently. Then she turned her palm and a white bottle appeared in her palm. She said, in addition, you take this bottle of elixir first. This is it. Thinking of her previous agreement with Su Li, Chu Lu couldn't help but tremble slightly. She was excited. Su Li shook her head and smiled. She said, no, it is just an elixir to consolidate the corporeity. It was not the antidote of the Hongshan powder. Chu Lu was disappointed. She hesitated for a moment and nodded to take it. She couldn't help but ask, I am not injured. Why do I have to take this? Isn't the Hongshan powder an injury? Poison. Su Li smiled faintly. She said, you are just afraid that the old poison has not been removed and the new poison will be born. However, I always like to win people by virtue. I will only choose to end the enemy's life by poisoning him. Chu Lu's face was slightly red when she heard that. Su Li knew what she was thinking about. Although you can't feel it, the Hongshan powder has been lurking in your body for 8 years. How can it not be hurt? Su Li glanced at Chu Lu. Chu Lu immediately felt that she was seen through. Her face was redder. If you want to remove the poison, you must have a strong enough physique first. Otherwise, you can't bear the outbreak of the Hongshan powder when I remove the poison for you. You will die on the spot. Won't I break my promise? Su Li patted Chu Lu's shoulder gently and said softly, after the auction fair, the Hehuan sect in Yunjing City will disappear. At that time, your poison will be removed. It's up to you whether you want to leave or stay. Looking at Su Li's sincere and clear eyes, Chu Lu's heart beat faster. She had never seen such beautiful eyes. The light in them seemed to be nimbus. At this moment, Chu Lu had an intuition. This intuition came from the kindness of Su Li. She couldn't help but believe that this time she met a liar like Yi Tian. After 5 minutes, Chu Lu left at night. The cold wind blew through the window of the attic. Her hair was blown to Su Li's forehead. Her eyes were full of killing intent. Her father didn't seem to be sensible. If he didn't ask her to take revenge for her mother, she would be angry. The next morning, Dongfang Rui was still busy in the study. His eyes were red. It was obvious that he hadn't slept for several days. Wu Bin was distressed, but he didn't persuade Dongfang Rui because he knew that no matter what he said, Master would not listen to him. When Dongfang Rui came back from the imperial palace that day, he changed completely. Facing Wu Bin's inquiry, Dongfang Rui only said one sentence, gather all the people in the Yunj sect. Only by slaughtering the Wu family can I calm down my anger. Then, there was the next action. The Yunj sect was created by Dongfang Rui. Since the day Su Yun disappeared, he secretly cultivated this small force. The purpose was very simple. That was, when she found Su Yun, he would let the people in the Yunj sect protect her all the time so that she would never be hurt again. After finding Su Yun's body, Dongfang Rui was depressed for a while. Then, he cultivated the Yunj sect more fiercely. The purpose was to protect his future children from Su Yun. Now, the Yunj sect obviously had a new purpose. At this moment, a manservant suddenly came in. He trotted to Wu Bin and whispered something in his ear. Wu Bin was surprised. He bowed to Dongfang Rui and said, "Master, Miss is here. She wants to see you." Dongfang Rui was stunned for a moment. Then his stiff face showed joy. He put down the file and was about to go out. But when he walked to the door, he turned back and said hurriedly, "Quick, help me get clean clothes and a basin of water." He hadn't taken a bath for a few days. How could he see his daughter with such a sloppy appearance? Wu Bin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He quickly arranged someone to help Dongfang Rui freshen up. Under Dongfang Rui's constant urging, it only took less than a quarter to finish. Su Li sat in the room and took a sip of tea. In the blink of an eye, the table was filled with all kinds of imperial refreshments. Dongfang Rui came in a hurry. When he saw Su Li, his eyes lit up. But then he saw the refreshments beside Su Li. His excitement finally cooled down. He walked in and said slowly, "Li. Su Li, why do you come to find me? No matter what you say, I will try my best to do it." His words were stammering and not fluent at all. His tone was even lower, and he did not have the slightest bit of the dignity of a prince. Although he quickly dressed up and washed, Su Li could see at a glance that he was much haggard. After a moment of silence, Su Li's tone was not so cold. She said, "What can happen to me?" "But did you forget to tell me something?" Dongfang Rui was shocked and looked at Wu Bin, who just came in. Wu Bin was puzzled. The Lord and Miss were chatting well. Why did they suddenly look at him? At this time, Su Li said again, "Don't doubt Butler Wu. I have seen the movement of the prince's mansion. Someone told me that you want to rebel, but I know it is not true. Do you already know who killed my mother?" Dongfang Rui was silent. The movement of the Lord's mansion, even Su Li found it. He clearly did everything in secret. How could it be easily found? He had been sending people to monitor the Wu family. Everything was normal in the Wu family. There was no sign of fighting against the enemy. "Tell me, what are you worried about?" A slight smile suddenly appeared on Su Li's face, but Wu Bin was frightened by it. He said, "Are you worried that I will be stupid enough to seek revenge on him alone? Or have you forgotten the agreement between you and me?" "Of course. I haven't forgotten." Dongfang Rui looked bitter. He was just worried that after telling Su Li would be involved in quarrels for no reason like her mother. But now that Su Li came to him, he had to say it. Otherwise, he completely believed that Su Li would not recognize him. He took a deep breath and finally said, "It's the Wu family." Su Li's eyes flickered. "Which Wu family?" "General Wu's mansion. Wu Jin, Wu Xiuxiu." Chapter 199. Wu Lirong. How do you know this name? Dongfang Rui was slightly shocked. It was a name that was frequently mentioned in his era. Now no one mentioned it at all. How did Su Li know it? He suddenly found that his understanding of Su Li was just superficial. He knew nothing about how this girl rose up alone under the oppression of Zhu Yan and how she got the position of the lecturer of the affiliated school of the National Academy. Now, she had just been in Yunjing for less than a year, but her ability to grasp information was far better than him who grew up in Yunjing. Su Li narrowed her eyes and didn't answer. In the previous life, Lord Rui married a second wife soon after Su Zipei entered the general's mansion. The new wife was Wu Lirong of the Wu family. At that time, Wu Lirong was a widow. Her husband died early. It was said that she was a curse to her husband. Lord Rui married her at that time, which naturally caused some controversy. Later, Su Li poisoned Dongfang Rui. It seemed that Wu Lirong was a curse to her husband. "I'm just guessing." Su Li stopped thinking and looked up at Dongfang Rui. She said, "What was the relationship between Wu Lirong and my mother in those years?" Dongfang Rui's eyes darkened. Finally, he talked about the grievances in those years. In the year when Su Yun was studying in Yunjing, she gradually became friends with Dongfang Rui. Wu Lirong, who was also studying in the National Academy at that time, also fell in love with Dongfang Rui. Wu Lirong was the daughter of a general. She was superior to Su Yun in both status and identity. In her cognition, it was not difficult for Dongfang Rui to make a choice between them. Later, Dongfang Rui's actions told her that it was not difficult to make a choice. Dongfang Xiao agreed to the marriage and praised Su Yun as the female Zhuge of the Dehan country. Her inner resentment and jealousy finally transformed into hatred. On the night before the wedding of Dongfang Rui and Su Yun, she used the identity of Su Yun's sister, Su Yu, to invite her. Su Yun was fooled. She hurried to the appointment and fell into the trap. Dongfang Rui stopped when he said that. The room fell into dead silence for a while. Dongfang Xiao didn't tell him what happened later. For him, it was enough to know that it was Wu Lirong who set the trap and chased Su Yun. Wu Lirong must have been approved by her father to use the soldiers. "I don't care if she sends people secretly or openly, it has nothing to do with me." Dongfang Rui clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. He said, "Only when I get Wu Lirong's head can I explain to your mother." Hearing this, Wu Bin was overwhelmed with emotions and his blood was boiling. It was rare to see a man as devoted to love as his master. Even if he had to die in the end, he would not regret it. Su Li sneered and poured cold water on him mercilessly. "Dongfang Xiao asked you to fight against the Wu family. Are you willing to be used by him?" Dongfang Rui frowned slightly. Su Li suddenly called him Dongfang Xiao. Although he was not close to his third brother, it was too unscrupulous for her to call him Dongfang Xiao. "Miss." Wu Bin's complexion changed slightly. Su Li turned her head and stopped Wu Bin with Ling Li's eyes. She said, "If my mother were still with you, she would definitely advise you to think twice. Think about it. If you really lead troops to attack the Wu family, how much chaos will it cause in Yunjing City?" This, Dongfang Rui hesitated and didn't say anything. He only thought about revenge and didn't think about the consequences of rushing into the Wu family. Dongfang Rui's reaction disappointed Su Li. But on second thought, if her father was smart enough, he would not be used by Su Zipei in the previous life. Dongfang Rui was bold but not astute. At most, he had some achievements in training warriors. She should have thought of it earlier. "Miss, just say it." Wu Bin was a little impatient. He couldn't help but ask. "After Master made the decision, I felt it was very inappropriate. But I couldn't think of a reason." Su Li glanced at Wu Bin and continued to say to Dongfang Rui, "I heard that you set the date of the auction. It's a good day. However, once the date is set, it means that a large number of sects in the martial arts circle will pour into Yunjing City." Dongfang Rui's expression finally changed. The biggest dream of every sect in the martial arts circle was to have a country as a backing. If chaos broke out in Yunjing City at this time, those sects would definitely take advantage of it. His brother had been in office for many years. How could he make such a stupid mistake? Dongfang Xiao is old. His princes all stare at the throne of the emperor. Each of them has their own ideas, just like you in those years. Su Li smiled meaningfully and said, "I don't know how you felt when you saw Dongfang Xiao sweeping the world and becoming the emperor of the Dehan country. But obviously, his sons didn't inherit his deep scheming. The first prince and the Hehuan sect cooperated with each other. The third prince also had the help of the counselors of the sect. What do you think Dongfang Xiao will think when he sees this situation?" Dongfang Rui's face was gloomy. If he still didn't understand Su Li's words, he was really an idiot. Dongfang Shao wanted to use him to eliminate the forces of the sects behind the princes. Dongfang Rui felt bitter. When the third brother told him about the Wu family, he really thought that the third brother was soft-hearted. It turned out that the third brother had this idea. Su Li's analysis was reasonable. Dongfang Rui had no reason not to believe it. Seeing that his biological daughter not only grew up but also inherited her mother's quick thinking, Dongfang Rui was gratified. Yun, you definitely can't bear to see me in such pain and stupidity, so you sent her to me, right? Although she hasn't recognized me as her father, I am satisfied to see her live like this. Dongfang Rui was emotional and finally calmed down. He looked at Su Li and said, "Then, what do you think I should do?" Su Li's eyes became cold and she said, "I just give you a suggestion." "What do you want to do?" "It's up to you. Since I can detect the movement of the prince's mansion, Dongfang Shao and other sects can also detect it. You are like an arrow on the bow, and you have to shoot it. But there are many ways to attack the Wu family." After an hour, the tea was cold. Su Li stood up and saluted. Then she left the prince's mansion without saying anything. Dongfang Shao knew Dongfang Rui's character well, but he didn't know Su Li was a variable. After returning to the affiliated school, Su Li began to buy a large number of secret medicines, including poison and wound medicine. Fortunately, Wu Bin was clever. He knew that Su Li was obsessed with refining medicine, so he sent a large number of medicinal materials. 80% of the stock of the prince's mansion was moved. Su Li didn't refuse because she was really short of medicinal materials. Some things couldn't be bought with money. Only people with a background like Dongfang Rui were qualified to get them. If she refused directly only because of the agreement between her and Dongfang Rui, she would be utterly naive. In this way, Wu Bin saw the hope of the reconciliation between the miss and the master. He immediately spent a lot of money to buy medicinal materials. In such a peaceful but not peaceful day, time went by. It was September 15th. On this day, it rained heavily. The entire Yunjing city was wrapped in rain. There were almost no pedestrians on the street. People didn't want to go out on rainy days. In front of the Lord Rui's mansion, thousands of royal guards were ready to go. It was full of killing intent. Dongfang Rui wore a military uniform and looked cold. The rain dripped along the edge of the helmet. Wu Bin beside him also looked cold. He held a long spear and shouted, "Go!" Boom! The horses galloped and splashed a lot of muddy water. In the blink of an eye, the Wu family was surrounded. Many people who thought that he was going to rebel were shocked. Dongfang Rui's target was the Wu family of the general's mansion. Why? It was said that Dongfang Rui almost married the daughter of the Wu family. How could he fight against the Wu family now? Suddenly being surrounded, the Wu family was already in a mess. The womenfolk living in the backyard even began to pack up and flee. Only the lineal children of the Wu family in the main house were still calm. "Dad, there must be a misunderstanding. Why don't you let me go to negotiate?" Wu Jin stood out and said respectfully. Wu Xiuxiu's eyes were full of worry. Her silly brother would be killed at this time. General Wu Suijun, looked at Wu Jin with appreciation. Then he said in a low voice, "No. Jin, you and Xiuxiu hide in the tunnel. Lord Rui is well prepared this time. He doesn't come with good intentions. He won't give up easily. I will meet him in person." Dad. Hearing this, all the children in the hall were suddenly worried. Wu Suijun was the backbone of the Wu family. If something happened to him, the Wu family would fall apart. That's settled. Wu Suijun stood up and sneered, I don't believe that Dongfang Rui dares to kill me. He can kill me. But at this time, Wu Bin's murderous voice suddenly came into the mansion. He said, according to the order of the emperor, the 8th Lord personally comes to arrest the real murderer of Su Yun, Wu Lirong. If anyone dares to stop me, I will kill him without mercy. Wu Suijun's expression changed greatly. Dongfang Rui didn't act according to common sense at all. He clearly wanted to exterminate the Wu family, but his words were tactful. Even if the Wu family was killed, Dongfang Rui could use the excuse of stopping him from arresting the real murderer. When did Dongfang Rui, who only knew how to read sages and was full of righteousness, become so sinister? Kill. For a moment, the sound of killing was loud, and the screams of the Wu family were continuous. Neither Wu Bin nor Dongfang Rui showed any sign of mercy. They had been suppressed for too long. In the misty rain, Su Li stood on the roof and watched the fire of the Wu family from afar. A faint smile appeared on her face. Dongfang Shao, if you want to take advantage of Dongfang Rui, you have to see whether I agree or not. Fang Yuan stood aside and held an umbrella for Su Li. He couldn't help but transmit the sound in silence, don't we, go to help. Su Li shook her head slightly and looked at the shadows passing through the roof in the darkness. She said, we have more important things to do. Let Chu Qingning pay attention to Wu Lirong. As long as he kills her, the interest of the Wu family will be paid. Fang Yuan nodded slightly and turned to look at the nothingness in the distance. With the noise of the rain, it was difficult for other sects to find them. In addition, Su Li set the tactical matrix in advance. Even if the group of people rushed to them, they might not find them. Soon, the first group of black shadows came to the street where the Wu family was located. The leader was Elder Dao, who arrived in Yunjing a few days ago. Elder Dao scanned the street with his psychic awareness and found the royal guards and Dongfang Rui guarding outside the door. He immediately sneered. The Wu family belonged to the first prince. The cooperation between the Hehuan sect and the first prince was still ongoing. Naturally, they should benefit each other and help each other. There were not many people around Dongfang Rui. As long as he captured Dongfang Rui and threatened him, the crisis of the Wu family would be eliminated. As for killing Dongfang Rui, he didn't want to offend the Dongfang family for the Hehuan sect for the time being. Capture Dongfang Rui with me. Don't worry about anything else. Elder Dao transmitted the sound in silence secretly. The people of the Hehuan sect immediately rushed to Dongfang Rui. In the blink of an eye, they were less than 50 meters behind Dongfang Rui. At this moment, swish, 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 swish. 8 black-robed figures jumped down from the roof of a nearby building at the same time, blotting out the sky. Without saying a word, they charged towards the Hehuan sect. As soon as they came into contact, several people from the Hehuan sect immediately screamed and fell down. Their blood dyed the rainy night red. Chapter 200. Retreat. Retreat quickly. Elder Dao shouted and quickly retreated. He didn't bring all the people of the Hehuan sect tonight. He didn't expect to encounter such a dilemma. Suddenly, he sniffed. Although the rain covered it, he still smelled a very slight rancid smell under the robe of the black-robed man. Corpse puppet. It turned out to be a corpse puppet. Elder Dao suddenly realized and then shouted angrily, Lianshi cult, you and I are irreconcilable. Every move of the 8 inborn corpse puppets was a killing move. In the blink of an eye, many people around him died. After the news spread to the sect, he didn't know whether he could keep his position as an elder or not. Just when Elder Dao thought that he had escaped from the attack range of the corpse puppet, a bright sword light flashed behind him. Crack! A bloody arm was cut off and fell into the muddy pool. Aw, 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 aw. Elder Dao screamed and went away in an instant. He didn't care about the people around him and fled alone. Without the protection of the elder, a group of people who had just reached the first or second hurdle of the inborn hurdle were quickly slaughtered by the corpse puppets. Feng Yuan lifted his bamboo hat and went to the roadside to pick up the broken arm. He poured the genuine energy into it. The next moment, Elder Dao's right arm burst into blood mist with a bang sound. After doing this, Feng Yuan glanced at Dongfang Rui, who was looking at him. He jumped onto the eaves and disappeared without any hesitation. If he could, he preferred to hold the umbrella quietly for Su Li. Of course, he was also very happy to help Su Li to frame others. Everyone disappeared, leaving only corpses on the ground. Dongfang Rui took a deep breath. There was a faint horror in his eyes. Was that the arrangement that Su Li said? She had such a senior around her. Feng Yuan returned to Su Li and took the umbrella handle from her hand. Su Li said with a smile, "You are in the third hurdle of the inborn hurdle, but you can cut off the arm of a person in the fifth hurdle of the inborn hurdle. Your AO sword skills have made good progress." Feng Yuan slightly smiled and bowed his head. "There are still many things that I don't understand. I just mastered a little bit. I am not much different from you. In the future, we can exchange experiences with each other. Maybe we can have new gains." As she said, Su Li suddenly looked in another direction. "Next, it's time to see what the Lianshi cult is made of." Under the curtain of rain, a group of black-clothed and masked men were running quickly on the rooftops. There were 42 of them, and all of them were at the innate realm. Soon, they were close to the Wu family's mansion. The leader of the masked men looked vigilant and looked around. He was much more careful than Elder Dao. The auction fair was about to begin. Nobody knew how deep the situation in Yunjing City was. At this moment, they naturally wanted to fish in troubled waters. If they could reduce the fighting power of other forces, it would be the best. As for the Wu family, if the Wu family didn't die out completely, they would naturally become Lei Feng and help. After all, they were close to the third prince. At this moment, they did not know that before they arrived, their whereabouts had been completely exposed by Elder Dao's roar. Turning the corner, they could still smell the strong smell of blood in the rain. The leader of the black-masked men saw the gap where the royal guards surrounded the Wu family. He was delighted and was about to lead his men to jump over. But at this moment, countless silver needles were mixed with the drizzle and shrouded all the black-clothed men like a storm. The leader of the black-clothed men snorted and immediately manipulated the corpse puppets to block the silver needles. The 12 people also followed suit and put the corpse puppets in front of them. In the next moment, all the corpse puppets in front of them were pierced into hedgehogs, and none of the needles fell on the living people. "You rascal, who gave you the courage to attack me?" The leader of the black-clothed men made a ferocious voice and manipulated the 8 corpse puppets to rush to the source of the silver needles. But he didn't rush for a few steps. There was a continuous sound of plop behind him. He looked back in amazement and found that all his men were in a coma. No one controlled the corpse puppets, so they naturally became dead. "What's going on?" The leader of the black-clothed men was shocked. They clearly dodged all the silver needles. Then, the leader of the black-clothed men fell down with his head up and fainted. Su Li stood on the edge of the eaves and flicked her sleeves to shoot all kinds of weapons. She shot all the vital parts of the black-clothed men, except for the leader of the black-clothed men. In the twinkling of an eye, the blood converged into a river along with the patter of the rain. Ling Li sat in the room and watched the scrolls of intelligence sent by the people of the Tianya house. He fell into a long silence. Someone did what he always wanted to do. Then, the Lianxia cult and the Hehuan sect would definitely turn against each other and fight to the death. But he didn't know who did it. Master, maybe they really met each other and the situation was chaotic. Then, it evolved into a big scuffle. Ling Xian gently touched the wrinkles between Ling Li's eyebrows. Ling Li pushed her away without a trace, which made the smile on her face stiff. Ling Li stood up and stood by the window. He would not have the naive idea like Ling Xian. There must be someone manipulating this matter to make all the advantages fall to their side. This person stood on their side, but was unwilling to show up. Ling Li held his breath slightly. He thought of a person. In the second half of the night, more sects emerged. They weakened their strength by the chaos. Under Su Li's manipulation, no one got any benefit in the end. All of them were seriously injured. There was a glimmer of light in the sky. What was hidden in the darkness disappeared with the fading darkness, leaving only corpses on the street. Dongfang Rui looked tired, but his eyes were bright. Looking at the dead Wu family, he turned his stiff neck and asked hoarsely, "Where is Wu Lirong?" Wu Bin's face was covered with blood. He walked over and said with a bitter smile, "I found her, but, then, he asked someone to carry a corpse over. When I found her, she was already a corpse. Last night, it was very chaotic. I don't know who killed her." Looking at Wu Lirong who had already died, Dongfang Rui pulled out the long sword from his waist and cut off Wu Lirong's head. When the blood spilled, he wrapped it carefully and held it in his arms. This time, he breathed a long sigh of relief. "Go back. It's enough." "Yes, master," Wu Bin said and retreated quickly with his people, leaving only the broken wall of the Wu family covered with blood. Wu Suijun sat upright in the center of the main room and didn't move all night. It seemed that the people of Lord Rui's mansion didn't see him at all. They broke into the Wu family wantonly and killed all the non-lineal descendants. Except that Wu Lirong died miserably and her corpse was taken away, Dongfang Rui had a sense of propriety. The main family of the Wu family didn't suffer much loss. But Wu Suijun would never be grateful for Dongfang Rui's mercy. Besides the Ling family, the Wu family had another deadly enemy, Lord Rui's mansion. After the people of Lord Rui's mansion left, a large number of city guards appeared and began to clean the street and carry the corpses. Hu Daiden ordered people to carry the corpses away and couldn't help but be shocked. It turned out that the seemingly gentle Lord Rui was so horrible when he went crazy. There were 500 corpses near the Wu family. The emperor acquiesced Lord Rui to commit such a crime. I didn't expect that the relationship between Lord Rui and the emperor was so good. Hu Daiden muttered to himself and sighed in his heart. The day before Lord Rui took action, he received an order from his superior that no matter what happened to Lord Rui, he shouldn't take action. He thought that according to Lord Rui's temperament, he would kill dozens of people at most. He didn't expect that the real number was 10 times that he guessed. At this moment, Dongfang Shao, who had just got up and washed, was eating breakfast with the help of a maid. Suddenly, he received the news from Hu Daiden. He was so shocked that he almost spat out blood. He was not shocked because of the 500 lives, but because Dongfang Rui actually gave a false order and slaughtered the Wu family in his name. All the collateral descendants of the Wu family were killed by Dongfang Rui. This enmity was too great. He just wanted Dongfang Rui to beat the Wu family a little bit. He even guessed that in that complicated situation, Dongfang Rui would give up even if he couldn't kill a maid of the Wu family. But when he woke up one night, he got the news that Dongfang Rui killed all the people of the Wu family except for the lineal descendants. Even the maids and servants were not spared. Is Dongfang Rui crazy? Just for a woman who has been dead for more than 10 years. Dongfang Xiao stood up angrily and overturned the table. Then he coughed violently. Eunuch Feng was so shocked that he immediately called the imperial doctor. After calming down, Dongfang Xiao looked gloomy and sighed to himself, "I'm old. I can't even out-scheme others." After thinking for a while, he understood. Dongfang Rui could be used as a tool by him. Naturally, he could be used by others. Obviously, someone gave Dongfang Rui advice and told him how to take revenge. Dongfang Rui was impulsive and didn't think about the consequences. The Wu family has been greatly weakened. The Ling family also has few talents. Now, the Ma family dominates. Ho ho, Dongfang Zhao's smile was very cold. Eunuch Feng trembled. Was it the Ma family who did this? But the Ma family had always been loyal to the emperor. The position of the emperor is really attractive. Everyone wants to sit on it. Dongfang Xiao sat up reluctantly and thought deeply. The Ling family and the Wu family are like fire and water. Instead of letting them unite to deal with the Ma family, it is better to consider strengthening the strength of one of them. The eighth brother of the Wu family acts rashly. I am afraid that he has rebelled against me. The Ling family is loyal and can be used. After making up his mind, Dongfang Xiao cheered up and said, "Summon General Ling Ping to the imperial palace." Yes, sir. On the day when the whole city was in chaos because of the Wu family, Ling Ping inexplicably took the position of the Defender General of the state. It was the glory of his father. That was to say, his current status was no worse than that of Prime Minister Ma and Prime Minister Tang. His military power even exceeded that of Wu Suijun. But during this time, he stayed in Yunjing and did nothing. In the past few years, he had been fighting outside and won many battles. The imperial palace always gave him 1,000 taels of gold and so on. He didn't hear the news of promotion. Do I have to stay in Yunjing city obediently if I want to promote my military rank? For a moment, General Ling Ping was at a loss. Ling Li, who knew the whole process, got the news. Although he was a little surprised, he was not very shocked. Dongfang Xiao needed to balance the big families in his hands. The mansion of Prime Minister Tang had always been prominent, but Dongfang Xiao seemed to put it out of his consideration. Now Dongfang Rui's raid on the Wu family was a great success, and the strength of the Wu family was weakened to the bottom. Out of Dongfang Zhao's expectation, Dongfang Xiao urgently promoted Ling Ping's military rank so that the status of the Ling family and the Ma family could be equal. As for Ling Ping's military merits, he had already accumulated enough under his arrangement. But Dongfang Xiao pretended not to know and delayed promoting Ling Ping. Thinking of this, Ling Li smiled. The person who secretly helped him really helped him a lot. Chapter 201. The next morning assembly. Civil and military officials gathered from all directions of Yunjing city. Different from the usual noisy atmosphere, this time everyone came and stood silently, waiting for the morning court to start. As the hour approached, Wu Suijun's figure finally appeared outside the palace gate slowly. All the officials who saw him changed their expression slightly, because Wu Suijun was not wearing an official robe, but a military uniform for killing enemies on the battlefield. He didn't bring a knife. Some people secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Anyone who was like Wu Suijun, whose family was confiscated inexplicably, would go crazy. It was disrespectful for Wu Suijun to wear a military uniform, but the fact that he didn't bring a knife proved that he hadn't lost his mind. Wu Suijun walked straight into the hall of the palace gate and stood in the second seat on the right below the throne. Many people had their own thoughts. Today, Wu Suijun came prepared. It seemed that the morning assembly would be lively. The emperor is here. Suddenly, Eunuch Feng walked to the front of the throne and shouted. His deep voice resounded throughout the palace hall. For a moment, all the officials saluted and shouted, "Long live your majesty! Long live your majesty!" Ling Ping was promoted to a general, and his official rank was the same as Wu Suijuan's. He stood in the second position on the left, which happened to be the same as Wu Suijuan's. He lowered his head slightly and glanced at Wu Suijuan's cold face. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. After such a tragedy happened in his family, he could still keep so calm. His scheming was really incomparable. After a while, Dongfang Shao, wearing a dragon robe, walked to the throne step by step with his back bent. He waved his sleeves and sat down slowly. He glanced at all the officials present, showing the majesty of the Emperor of the Han country. Eunuch Feng glanced at Wu Suijun and said as usual, "If you have something to say, report it in advance. If not, dismiss." As soon as the words came out, the whole palace was silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on Wu Suijun. The next moment, Wu Suijun stepped out of the crowd and saluted respectfully. He raised his head and revealed a pair of cold eyes. "I reported in advance." Dongfang Shao seemed to be dim-sighted. He just saw Wu Suijuan's armor and pretended to be surprised. "What's the matter? What about your armor?" Seeing the emperor's reaction, Wu Suijuan's face darkened slightly. Dongfang Shao pretended to be ignorant, which was clearly to make him suffer, but he didn't. "Tell 8th Lord, Dongfang Rui." He borrowed the emperor's name to charge into this official's residence and kill the innocent. None of the collateral relatives of the Wu family survived. Although my sister Wu Lirong deserved to die, her head was cut off by Dongfang Rui. It was really heartless. I hope that your majesty will uphold justice for this official and punish him. Wu Suijuan's tough attitude made the gentleness on Dongfang Zhao's face disappear gradually. He lowered his head and touched the ring in his hand, saying absent-mindedly, "So you are talking about this." Although Wu Lirong went too far to chase after the royal princess without permission. However, Prince Rui also did something wrong in this matter, little Feng Zi. Eunuch Feng immediately answered, "Your Majesty, I'm here." Dongfang Shao nodded and said in a low voice, "8th Lord, come to the hall." "Your Majesty's oral order, select a web page, come to the hall," the eunuch's voice spread through the palace. Wu Suijuan's face became more and more gloomy. Dongfang Shao pointed out what Wu Lirong had done. How could he continue to stand on the side of righteousness? Assaulting the royal princess was a serious crime that would lead to the confiscation of the property and beheading of the head. That was to say, Wu Lirong took advantage of Su Yun before he married into the Wu family. But if he really cared about it, the Wu family had no chance to win. Was Dongfang Shao really going to beat him down like how he beat the Ling family before? Wu Suijuan's thoughts changed rapidly. He wore a military uniform to remind the emperor of the Wu family's contribution to the Han dynasty. But if Dongfang Shao was really afraid of the Wu family, his action would be regarded as taking advantage of the emperor's favor, which would make Dongfang Shao more unhappy. Taking a deep breath, Wu Suijun suppressed his anger. Although he was very angry that the collateral relatives of the Wu family were destroyed, he had to adjust his mentality since Dongfang Zhao's attitude towards the Wu family had changed. He didn't want to sacrifice the real Wu family for those unimportant children and servants. After a short wait, Dongfang Rui answered the summons. But the clothes he wore made all the officials horrified. Another more ruthless one came. Dongfang Rui was in mourning. His face was pale and his eyes were red. The tears on his face had not dried yet. It seemed that he had just cried. Wu Suijuan's eyes twitched violently. He opened his mouth but dared not to ridicule him. Ma Xiang and Ma De laughed in their hearts. Today, Wu Suijuan's clothes were much whiter. Walking to Wu Suijun, Dongfang Rui pursed his pale lips and bowed his head. Greetings, my brother. Dongfang Shao showed concern on his face. He stood up and said hurriedly, Brother Rui, quickly bow to the emperor. Why are you wearing mourning clothes? You also look terrible. I know you are sad, but remember to take care of your body. Come, take a seat. Eunuch Feng, ask the imperial doctor to check Lord Rui. Don't let him be too sad and hurt his body. Yes, your majesty. Eunuch Feng lowered his head obediently, but he was very confused. This time, the 8th prince faked the emperor's oral order. The emperor should be angry when he saw it. Why didn't he get angry? Instead, he showed a brotherly look. Dongfang Rui was also confused about this. But this time, he was used by Dongfang Shao. So, he was alert enough. He showed a trace of gratitude on his sad face. He sat on the octagonal chair moved by the eunuch and said, Thank you for your understanding, my brother. I am going to worship the princess. The imperial palace summoned me urgently. I have no time to change my clothes. So, I have to offend you. As soon as Dongfang Rui said that, Prime Minister Ma and Prime Minister Tang rolled their eyes at the same time. It would take an hour to go from Lord Rui's mansion to the imperial palace. However, Dongfang Rui arrived in less than a quarter of an hour. He was a talent to lie so calmly. It was said that Lord Rui was a rare honest member of the royal family. Now it seemed to be a lie. I see. Dongfang Shao was suddenly enlightened. Then, he looked sad. He said, The princess has passed away for many years. Brother Rui, don't be too sad. You have just found the princess. You should take good care of your body and raise the princess well. Thank you, my brother. The two of them did not mention anything about the Wu family at all, but instead talked about the memorial service for Su Yun. It was clear that the atmosphere between the two of them was harmonious, but all the officials in the court had goosebumps all over their bodies, their hearts trembling in fear. This was the first time that the emperor admitted the identity of Su Yun as the princess. In addition, Wu Lirong chased after them. Didn't it mean that the Wu family had committed a big crime? The more Wu Suijun listened, the worse he felt. He regretted mentioning Dongfang Rui. Since Dongfang Shao started it, would he carry out the immature plan in advance today? But at this moment, Dongfang Shao suddenly turned his head. His voice became cold and resounded in the court. Wu Suijun, do you know your crime? Plop. Wu Suijun knelt down without saying a word. His forehead was covered with cold sweat. He didn't look as righteous as before. I know my crime. Wu Suijun's sudden change shocked all the officials. They thought that Wu Suijun would quibble. Unexpectedly, he confessed. Dongfang Shao was surprised. He narrowed his turbid eyes slightly and continued to ask in a slow tone, Then tell me, what crime did you commit? Wu Suijun thought quickly and tried to figure out Dongfang Zhao's mind. He knew his current situation. If he said something wrong, he might be doomed eternally. Dongfang Rui sat in the chair. The fear he had when he just entered the palace faded away. As Su Li said, Dongfang Shao didn't mention anything about his false oral edict. Instead, he stood on the same side and began to attack the Wu family. However, Su Li said that if Wu Suijun was smart enough, at this moment, Wu Suijun said, I committed the crime of concealing the truth and not reporting it. At that time, my sister used the force in the mansion to attack Princess Rui without authorization. Later, she hired warriors in Jianghu to hunt her down. It was a terrible crime. A few years later, my sister told me that I made a big mistake because I cherished my sister and wanted to save her life. Your Majesty, please punish me. When he said this, the hall was so quiet that even a needle falling could be heard. Wu Lirong was dead. The dead could not speak. Wu Suijun put all the blame on his sister. How could he say that he cherished his sister? Many officials were shocked by Wu Suijun's ruthlessness and decisiveness. Dongfang Shao hid the fear in his eyes. Wu Suijun was indeed a little scheming. He was much more difficult to deal with than the Ling family. Wu Suijun, if your sister was still alive, she would definitely be sentenced to death by dismembering her body to uphold the law. You also made a big mistake because of your sister. But for the sake of your sincere confession and the fact that you didn't know it in the early years, I will demote you to a third-grade general. You will march the army to the border of Nanjiang country and make up for your crime by guarding the border of Dahan country. How about it? Wu Suijun's expression changed. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." He was a third-grade general, while Ling Ping was promoted to the second-grade general yesterday. He never thought that his official rank would fall below that of Ling Ping. However, at this moment, no matter how angry and resentful he was, he could only grit his teeth and swallow it. Wu Suijun lowered his head. Dongfang Shao smiled again. He turned to Dongfang Rui and said in a low voice, "Brother Rui, you also made a mistake. No matter what, you can't vent your anger on ordinary servants. Otherwise, the Dongfang family will become a cruel royal family in the eyes of the world." You are right. I am willing to accept any punishment for what I did on impulse. Dongfang Rui did not mean to disobey Dongfang Shao, although the so-called ordinary servants were not ordinary. Dongfang Shao narrowed his eyes and nodded. Then you will not go to the morning court for 3 months and be deprived of a year's salary. Go back and reflect on yourself. Wu Suijun knelt on the ground and lowered his head. When he heard the punishment, his eyelids couldn't help but tremble. What Dongfang Shao gave Dongfang Rui was not a punishment, but a disguised vacation. In addition, Lord Rui hadn't come to the morning court for more than 10 years. As for the salary, Lord Rui had an auction house and the Baisho building. How could he be short of salary? Brother, I accept the punishment. As Dongfang Rui nodded to express his gratitude, this sentence was written on the morning court. All the civil and military officials had the same thought. The emperor really treated Prince Rui so well that there was nothing to say. Only Prime Minister Tang looked thoughtful. The ending of the morning court seemed calm, but it was dangerous. He really worried about Lord Rui. He had lived for so many years and experienced the changes of emperors. How could he not know the relationship between Dongfang Rui and Dongfang Shao? Now, for the princess who had died many years ago, he really risked his life. Such a temperament, but he was born in the royal family. Chapter 202. The setting sun was beside the intestines, and the horse was beside. Wu Suijun glanced at the old and the young in the family and finally fixed his eyes on Wu Jin. Without saying anything, he mounted the horse and left, stirring up the dust. Wu Jin took a deep breath, and his eyes were full of vigor. When his father came back, he would let his father know that he was capable enough to protect the entire Wu family. With Wu Suijun, the pillar of the family, going to the border, the prosperous Wu family was completely silent. Although Wu Suijun was still a senior official of the 3rd level, everyone could see that Dongfang Shao wanted to suppress him in the court that day. Therefore, he didn't dare to have any contact with the Wu family. The siblings of the Wu family, who used to be arrogant outside, also disappeared, which made people sigh. Dozens of miles along the official road in the east of Yunjing City, there was an osmanthus forest. At this moment, the osmanthus flowers were just in full bloom, but Su Li could still smell the faint fragrance of osmanthus from a distance. The carriage drove down the official road and went deep along the path in the osmanthus forest. A huge yard gradually came into view without the cover of the woods. Arriving here, Suli found that Dongfang Rui beside her didn't say a word. Squeak, the carriage stopped in front of the gate of the yard. Wu Bin jumped off the carriage and immediately took down the wooden ladder on the side of the carriage board. Then he lifted the curtain and said, "Master, Miss, here we are." After the incident of the Wu family, Dongfang Rui once again asked Suli to recognize her ancestors and return to the family. Suli only replied one sentence, which made Dongfang Rui speechless. "My surname is Su." But this time, Suli didn't resist Wu Bin's address. Wu Bin was a little happy when he heard that. He quickly signaled Dongfang Rui with his eyes. Dongfang Rui came back from the long memory. He hesitated and said, "Li, go in and have a look. This is the yard I built for your mother." Suli glanced at Wu Bin and then silently pushed the door open and walked in. Wu Bin was excited at once. He whispered to Dongfang Rui, "Master, you see, Miss has gradually accepted you now. You should be happy." Dongfang Rui nodded. Dongfang Rui was slightly refreshed, but he smiled bitterly. For more than a decade, he had never been to the yard. There were too many memories between him and Yun. Only Su Li's appearance made him pluck up the courage to step in again. When she pushed the door open, the smell of camphor fragrant wood came to her face, which calmed her slightly fluctuating state of mind. The courtyard wasn't very big, but the layout was ingenious and unique. This place was different from Prince Rui's residence as it was filled with the gentleness of a woman, which made her feel very comfortable. It was designed by Nyang. Her palm stroked the rockery and grass as she walked along the winding path. Her expression became even more calm, and the evil aura that remained in her heart from the slaughter of a few nights ago had completely vanished at this moment. It was obvious that someone had specially cleaned this place. Not a speck of dust could be seen, yet the courtyard's original appearance was maintained. The person who cleaned the courtyard was very attentive. With this thought in mind, Suli gently pushed open the door of the room. A cold breath came in. The furniture in the room was of the style of more than 10 years ago, but they were all wiped clean as new. She touched the desk and sat down gently. Didn't Mother also sit here every night and study diligently every day? Suddenly, Suli saw the clothes folded beside the pillow on the bed. She got up and walked over, picking them up and unfolding them. It was a silk dress for babies. Mother probably didn't know that she was pregnant at that time, but had already prepared the clothes and looked forward to her arrival. Suli held the silk dress and fell into a daze. In her mind, a woman with a vague face sat on the edge of the bed, folding the clothes and looking forward to it. Unknowingly, tears rolled down her cheeks and dripped onto her clothes. It turned out that her existence had been so carefully held in the heart of this woman and cared for and yearned for. "Mother," Suli tried to speak, and her hoarse voice echoed in the cold room, as if someone was responding. "Miss, the incense and candles are ready." Suddenly, Wu Bin's voice came from outside the door. Suli came to her sense, dried her tears and went out. This place was the courtyard built by her father for her mother, and now it was also the location of her mother's grave. Following Wu Bin to go up the mountain from the back of the courtyard, Suli saw a low slope and the lonely figure of Dongfang Rui on an extremely open hilltop. Suli narrowed her eyes and walked to the grave. She saw the words on the tombstone. The tomb of the deceased wife, Su Yun. She wrote, "Established by her husband, Dongfang Rui." It was a very simple tombstone. There was no epitaph to record Su Yun's life, and there was no special stone tablet. Your mother likes to be simple. If I make it complicated, she will definitely blame me. Dongfang Rui took a deep breath and pretended to be relaxed. He sighed and said, I wanted to let your mother enter the imperial mausoleum, but the Empress Dowager was still alive at that time. I couldn't resist, so I could only bury your mother here. Later, when I thought about it, maybe it was your mother's intention. The tomb of the Dongfang family was a little dirty for her. Su Li looked back at Wu Bin, who stood far away and didn't intend to come over. She couldn't help but sigh. She took the incense and candles and lit them. She walked a few steps forward and knelt down without hesitation. She inserted the burning incense into the soft soil and cleaned the dust on the tombstone with one hand. In front of me, you don't have to pretend to be strong. Hearing his daughter's plain words, Dongfang Rui's eyes were wet at once. His tone was slightly trembling. Your mother will definitely say that you are weak again. Forget it. When he came here every year, he couldn't help but cry like a dog. This time was not a big deal. Dongfang Rui took a deep breath and took the wrapped head. He uncovered the white cloth and put it in front of the tombstone. He was happy and said, Yun, I did it. I found my daughter. The enemy has been beheaded. You can rest in peace in heaven. The wind caressed his face like a soft sigh, whispering in his ear. Su Li tidied up the weeds on the edge of the tomb. She straightened up and looked down the mountain. The osmanthus forest was full of beautiful scenery. She suddenly felt relaxed. At least when her mother was alive, she had a very happy time. There was a man who loved her deeply. Her mother didn't live in vain. Now she saw her father and herself together. She would be very happy in another world. After a long silence, Su Li turned around and said, Lord Rui, let me stay with my mother for a while. Dongfang Rui was disappointed when he heard that. But he still said with concern, It's late. I will wait for you at the foot of the mountain for 2 hours. Talk to your mother. Okay. Seeing that Dongfang Rui turned around and left, the proprietress hiding in the grass was about to follow him immediately. But she was stopped by Xian Jingzhou, who transmitted the sound immediately. Now that things have come to this, you still refuse to come to your senses. Even if you don't care about what Dongfang Rui did, what about Yun? If you kill him, will Yun be happy? What should Li do? The proprietress was slightly shocked. She felt extremely complicated and blamed herself. After a long time, she suddenly loosened her grip as if she had lost all her strength. Then she walked down the mountain. Let's go. I don't have the face to see Li. She had always been very clear in her heart that if she had been able to rush over a little faster that year, Yun might not have died. After Dongfang Rui left, there was only Su Li and a head beside the tombstone. Su Li gently stroked the tombstone, as if she was stroking her mother's cheek. Mother, I always know that he doesn't owe you anything. He hasn't married in these years and has been looking for me in the world. But how can I call him Dad? She still remembered that she poisoned Dongfang Rui in the previous life. She watched the man fall down and spit out black blood. She was happy and ferocious. Then Su Zipei appeared quietly and told the truth. Dongfang Rui died with everlasting regret. The disbelief and remorse in his eyes never disappeared in her mind. How could such a terrible sin be completely forgotten just because he wanted to start all over again? You and I are so sinful that we can only die tragically. I will wait for you in the underground, ha ha ha, Yi Tian's words before her death suddenly came to her ears. Su Li's eyes were filled with tears. She sat beside the tombstone and slowly held her arms. At this moment, she was no longer a wise woman who could devise strategies, nor was she the calm Ms. Li, who controlled all the situations. She was just a 16-year-old girl who had no one to talk about her guilt. The mountain wind blew and made the white cloth of the head rustle. Finally, the head fell to one side and rolled to Su Li's feet. Suli raised her head and stared at the head for a long time. Suddenly, she frowned slightly and noticed the abnormality. Then the golden light condensed in her eyes. In Suli's eyes, Wu Lirong's face suddenly melted and twisted for a few seconds. Then, it turned into another face. She was not Wu Lirong. Suli's expression turned cold instantly. Her anger triggered her cultivation. Her black hair danced wildly in the wind and forest. In a rage, she smashed the head with one palm. Blood rained all over the sky. Wu Lirong was not dead yet. She stood up slowly. At this moment, she was furious but extremely calm. She could still maintain her disguise after death. Even she couldn't see the clue. Such a brilliant disguise skill was not like something in the martial arts circle at all. Instead, it was like the spiritual circle. Did Wu Lirong have something to do with the spiritual circle? An hour later, half of the sky was dyed with red clouds. Suli came down from the mountain. Dongfang Rui quickly took a thick cloak and put it on Suli. He said, "Butler Wu just said that it was windy on the mountain. Wear more clothes in case of catching a cold." Suli nodded slightly and stepped into the carriage. She didn't tell Dongfang Rui about Wu Lirong. In order to avenge her mother, she had made Dongfang Shao unhappy and the Wu family regarded her as an enemy. It was inappropriate for her to act rashly in a short time. She could handle the rest by herself. Seeing that Suli obediently got on the carriage with a gentler attitude than before, Dongfang Rui grinned contentedly and followed her to get on the carriage. At the same time, in an ordinary house in Yunjing City, Wu Lirong cautiously pushed open the door and walked in. There was only a small oil lamp in the dim room. The shadow under the flickering light looked extremely terrible. Wu Lirong saw the enlarged shadow under the light and immediately breathed a sigh of relief. She turned around and closed the door. But at this moment, a cold voice sounded faintly, "Wu Lirong, I took the risk of being exposed to let you escape. Should you fulfill your promise and help me find the whereabouts of Ning Qing?" At this moment, Wu Lirong had goosebumps on her back. It seemed that she was stared at by a poisonous snake in the dark and would die in the next moment. There was a layer of cold sweat on her forehead. She slowly turned around and smiled apologetically. "Senior, you must be joking. You also know that I am in a bad situation now. How can I casually send someone to inquire about the news? Why don't you wait for a few more days? After this period of time, when the limelight is over." Whoosh! A 3-foot-long sword flew over Wu Lirong's neck at a lightning speed and nailed to the wooden door behind her. It buzzed. "Aw, aw, aw." Wu Lirong was so scared that her face turned pale. She covered her neck and screamed. Suddenly, another thing flew over and blocked her mouth. It was a steamed bun. Chapter 203. Wu Lirong immediately covered her mouth. She found that her neck was not cut, but a red mark left by the sword. She felt a burning pain. He controlled his strength so precisely. His cultivation was beyond her imagination. However, although this person's cultivation was high, he had been hiding from place to place. After a few months, he changed more than a dozen places of residence. It seemed that he was being chased by more horrible people. The man seemed to have recognized Wu Lirong's identity. He asked her to help him find a woman named Ning Qing. In return, he would do something for her. At that time, she wanted to sound him out, so she asked him to find a scapegoat for her. After all, she had offended many people these years. She didn't want to be killed inexplicably on the street one day. Unexpectedly, the man asked her to find a mammy with a similar figure without hesitation. Then he used some tricks to make the mammy look like her. At that time, she immediately knew that she had encountered a treasure. On the night when Dongfang Rui killed her, she happened to go out and didn't return. So, she asked a substitute to take her place at home. Unexpectedly, she escaped a fatal disaster. When she came back, her brother Wu Suijun had been sent to the frontier. She didn't know what her brother was thinking. So, she didn't dare to go to the Wu family. After thinking about it, she could only find this man. My patience is limited. If you can't help me, I will take your life back and find someone else to help me. You have to think about it. The man's voice came from the darkness. Wu Lirong trembled. There was some fear on her charming face. But soon the fear was suppressed by the surging jealousy and hatred. Master, help me with one more thing. After it's done, I will immediately use all the resources in my hands to help you find that woman. I know that you are also in a difficult situation. If you look for someone else, how can you guarantee that that person will help you keep your secret like I did? Am I right? The man in the darkness fell into silence. After a long time, he said, "Do you want to die?" Wu Lirong stepped back and leaned against the door. Then she saw the sword still nailed to the door. She swallowed and said, "I don't want to die. But if I can't do it, I won't die in peace. Please help me. After it is done, I will repay you even if I have to work like a cow or a horse." Ha ha ha, the man let out a low laugh. Remember what you said today. I don't care if you work for me. As long as we find Ningqing, you'd better get lost immediately. Wu Lirong's breathing stagnated, and her face darkened. This person and Dongfang Rui were the same. Why wouldn't he like her? What was so bad about her? Why did everyone like Su Yun and wanted to marry her? Why did she end up as a son-in-law who coveted fame and fortune? While his heart was in turmoil, the person in the dark said impatiently, "What are you waiting for? If you don't want to talk, then scram." Wu Lirong came back to her senses and hurriedly said, "Please help me kill someone." A silver line flashed across the man's eyes under the black robe. Who is it? What's his cultivation? Don't worry about this, master. To master, killing her is as easy as blowing off dust. Wu Lirong smiled sinisterly and said, "Her name is Su Li. She usually lives in the affiliated school of the National Academy. Her cultivation is only in the acquired 8th hurdle." The man nodded and said, "This woman seems to be very famous, but it has nothing to do with me. You will get the news within 3 days. Remember what you said." Wu Lirong was overjoyed when she heard that. She quickly saluted and thanked him. Then she turned around. Her eyes were full of hatred. "Dongfang Rui, since you don't want to marry me, I will let you live in pain for the rest of your life." If Su Yun died, Su Li wouldn't live either. In the evening, after the class in the National Academy, a tall and thin middle-aged scholar walked to the gate of the National Academy with a book in his hand. The guard at the gate immediately smiled and greeted him, "Mr. Tao, long time no see. Are you going to the third prince's mansion again?" The middle-aged scholar who was called Mr. Tao nodded kindly and said, "Yes, the third prince has been busy with his studies recently. I am worried about him." The guard immediately respected him and said, "Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Tao. Take care." Watching the carriage go away, the old guard shook his head and sighed. Nowadays, there are not many scholars as dedicated as Mr. Tao. Yes. In the carriage, the middle-aged scholar lifted the sleeve covering his right hand and glanced at the wound where a large piece of flesh was cut off and the bone was exposed. Then he covered it again and looked at the traffic outside the window. He was gloomy. "Mr. Tao, we have arrived at the third prince's mansion." A voice came from outside the carriage. The middle-aged scholar immediately got off and walked briskly. There was a manservant waiting at the gate. Seeing him coming, the manservant immediately went to help him take the book. "The third lord has been waiting for you." The middle-aged scholar sighed deeply and said gratefully, "Thank you, Your Highness. It doesn't matter. Mr. Tao, please come with me." The manservant smiled and led the middle-aged scholar in. As soon as he stepped into the room, he saw Dongfang Lang coming and asking with concern, "Mr. Zisang, I heard that your people. Are you okay? I specially prepared a doctor for you." Tao Zisang looked ashamed. He lifted the wound on his arm and bowed his head. "This time, I miscalculated. I didn't expect that the people of the Hehuan sect had already found out our position and refined a large number of illusionary powder. Although I controlled the puppet to avoid the hidden weapons, the illusionary powder blended into the rain. I was hit accidentally." It turned out that Tao Zisang, the teacher of the third prince and the lecturer of the National Academy, was the leader of the black-shirt man who led the Lianshi cult to get a share of the night attack. He had another identity. He was the elder of the Lianshi cult. For the great event of the Lianshi cult, he had changed his appearance and lived in Yunjing City for 19 years. Then 13 years ago, he finally found an opportunity to become the teacher of the third prince and assist him to become a talent. It could be said that all the talents and wisdom that Dongfang Lang had now were taught by him. When Dongfang Lang saw the wound on Tao Zisang's hand, he was shocked and quickly arranged a doctor to treat Tao Zisang. The illusionary powder of the Hehuan sect. Does it mean that the eldest brother's people have already known our arrangement? Dongfang Lang frowned and said, "The Hehuan sect is now wanted by the whole country. How dare they be so arrogant?" Tao Zisang shook his head and said, "It is not the original people of the Hehuan sect who are arrogant, but the new elder. I heard from the spy that the Hehuan sect sent reinforcements for the auction fair. It seems that I have to ask for help from the sect." He had no choice but to ask for help. Tao Zisang didn't tell the third prince how heavy the loss of his men was. Only he himself knew that all the people he brought with him that night were dead. Even the corpse puppets were gone. He didn't know how he survived that inexplicably. Perhaps the person who killed him was negligent and thought that he was dead. However, he would not mention such a shameful thing to anyone. The people of the Hehuan sect were too powerful, so he failed. We should have listened to Ling Qinglan and stayed still. Otherwise, we wouldn't have such a big loss. Dongfang Lang couldn't help but sigh. Tao Zisang moved his lips and finally didn't refute. Although he always disliked Ling Qinglan and always felt that he was a little weird, he really couldn't find a reason to refute this time. The eldest brother should be very happy now, right? Dongfang Lang stood up and snorted, "Teacher, I will make you pay for your injury sooner or later." The first prince, Dongfang Xing, was not very happy. Now he was very angry. "Elder Dao, how can you be so reckless? You barged into the Wu family without telling me in advance and caused such a ruckus. How am I supposed to compete with third brother and fifth brother in the future?" First prince. Elder Dao covered his right shoulder which was oozing with blood and roared, "Do you forget that you took the initiative to seek cooperation with the Hehuan sect? I am not your subordinate." "You!" Dongfang Xing stared at him. How could this person be so rude? Chu Lu was respectful to him on the surface. Was this Elder Dao even unwilling to be polite on the surface? It seemed that Elder Dao realized that his tone was inappropriate. He took a breath and said slowly, "The matter of the Wu family is my responsibility. I will report to the hierarch and send more people to help Your Highness." "Your Highness, don't worry. I will go back to recuperate. Goodbye." Then Elder Dao got up and left. He could fight and kill in the martial arts circle. But when he came to Yunjing City where he had to make a lot of turns, he was really not used to it. How about giving the branch in Yunjing City to Chu Lu? Elder Dao, who had a bad start, felt a deep sense of dejection in his heart. Not only did he lose all his subordinates, but his relationship with the first prince was also very strained because of him. If he returned like this, would he be thrown directly into the 1,000 Poison Cave by the sect leader? Elder Dao couldn't help but shiver. He had to think about how to report to the hierarch. Ha 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 ha. After Dongfang Yang saw the news of the 2 mansions sent by Ma Jintian, he couldn't help but laugh and said, "My 2 brothers are really stubborn. After this matter, don't they know father's mind? Even if they do it well, father will not like them with the help of evil methods." Ma Jintian nodded with a smile and didn't forget to flatter, "The 5th prince is wise. After this matter, the emperor will definitely treat you differently. You can be the crown prince." Hearing this, Dongfang Yang laughed more cheerfully. He didn't have many outstanding achievements, but fortunately, he had 2 stupid brothers as his comparison. In this case, he must be the only one his father could choose. In the cold hall, Dongfang Wuxue sat on the wooden horse and stared at the door blankly. After a while, a middle-aged mammy came and said softly, "Your Highness, it's time to go. You should have a rest." Dongfang Wuxue pouted and said, "I won't go. I want to wait for father and mother." The middle-aged mammy still smiled and said, "Your Highness, you are growing up. If you don't sleep, you will become shorter. Father and mother will not like it." Dongfang Wuxue stood up aggrievedly and took the middle-aged mammy's hand to walk to the bedchamber. He said, "If I sleep, father and mother will come, right?" "Yes, Your Highness." "But you said it yesterday. Are you lying to me?" After a while, Dongfang Wuxue fell asleep and breathed evenly. The middle-aged mammy touched his forehead with a face full of pity. "Your mother annoyed the empress and has been banished to the cold palace by the emperor. Your father has many children. How can he come to see you? Your Highness, you are destined to grow up with loneliness." At the same time, the Linli building in Qinghe County just finished a busy day and closed the door. Mei Ruhan was busy settling the accounts. Luo Yichen and Fong Mu went to the secluded place. Only she and Fong Ling were here tonight. "Ruhan, I'm going to rest. It's late. You should rest early." "Well, I'll come after I finish these accounts." Mei Ruhan nodded and smiled. Today was the day when the disciples of the Linli building who trained in the secluded place finished their practice. After today, there would be a large number of loyal disciples in the Linli building. She and Haydn could have a good rest and practice. Suli didn't allow her to tell the truth about the Linli building. But later she pestered Luo Yichen to ask. Luo Yichen finally couldn't bear her pestering and told her all the facts. Mei Ruhan's choice was unexpectedly decisive. She chose to stay in the Linli building. Perhaps she had a heart that yearned for a more thrilling and exciting life. Mei Ruhan thought so. Luo Yichen's figure flashed in her mind, and she smiled sweetly. Chapter 204. Ah! A cry of pain came from the lobby. Ruhan, Fong Ling, Haydn and others immediately rushed from the back room to the central room. But when they saw Mei Ruhan's situation, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Mei Ruhan pulled out the barb on her wrist and smiled embarrassedly. "There is a wooden barb on the counter. I was careless. Sorry to scare you." "It doesn't matter." Haydn scratched his head and said with a smile, "I will ask someone to fix it tomorrow morning. Then, it will be smooth and covered with a cloth." "You're too careless. Your wrist is bleeding. Wait for me. I will get the medicine box for you." Fong Ling checked the wound on Mei Ruhan's hand and then ran back to the inner room. When everyone left, Mei Ruhan felt warm in her heart. Everyone in the Linli building was like her family and cared about her very much. Well, why is my wrist hot? Mei Ruhan looked down and pinched her left wrist. She frowned. It was just a small wooden thorn, and it had been pulled out. It should not have such a big reaction. As her wrist became hotter and hotter, Mei Ruhan suddenly panicked. She pinched her wrist with her hand, as if it could make her feel more comfortable. At this moment, there was a soft sound. An orange halo like a bracelet suddenly appeared on her smooth wrist. It was exuding a gentle heat, which made Mei Ruhan feel very warm. What is this? Why do I have this thing on me? Mei Ruhan curiously reached out to touch it, but her fingers passed through the halo and couldn't touch it at all. The orange halo only lasted for half a breath, and then it faded away. No matter how Mei Ruhan pressed it, it would not appear again. Strange, Mei Ruhan tilted her head and was puzzled. She yawned and suddenly felt very sleepy. She couldn't open her eyes. Forget it. Let's do the account tomorrow. Mei Ruhan staggered to the room and slept soundly without taking off her clothes. Fong Ling found her with the medicine box and smiled helplessly. Sister Mei is really tired these days. In the next few days, Mei Ruhan was a little absent-minded. She always made mistakes in the account. From time to time, she would be in a daze for a long time, which made Haydn and others worried. They wanted to ask a doctor for Mei Ruhan. Fortunately, Mei Ruhan finally recovered when Luo Yichen came back with others. Brother Luo, you're finally back. Before Luo Yichen entered the door, he was hugged by her. The cold smile on his face immediately turned soft. He comforted her softly, let's go in first. The disciples of the Linli building, who had just emerged from the secluded site, were all confused. So Protector Qin knew how to smile. Go in. I just let you become the official disciples of the Linli building. Do you learn to be in a daze and be lazy? Fong Mu's cold voice sounded behind him. After being an instructor in the secluded site for half a year, his temperament seemed to have changed a little. Hearing that, everyone immediately reacted and entered the Linli building in an orderly manner. Early in the morning, Old Li, who had drunk so much that his eyes were blurry, came over with a wine pot in his arms. He stammered, "Who are these people? Killing intent is soaring." Fong Mu's face immediately returned to a bright and warm smile. He smiled warmly and said, "Sir, they are all new waiters of the winery." Waiter? Oh. I see. Lao Li held the flagon and walked away. Fong Mu's face instantly became cold again. He looked at the newcomers who were shocked and shouted coldly, "Go in." Yes. Yes. The newcomers couldn't help but criticize in their hearts. It turned out that Protector Qin and Protector Mu were normal people. Then they still arranged so many terrible training tasks for them in the secluded site. In the underground addendum, 20 newcomers lined up in a row. All of them were in the acquired 9th hurdle. It only took half a year. With the support of Su Li's secret medicine, these ordinary people, who obviously didn't have much aptitude, all became seniors in the acquired 9th hurdle. Fong Ling put her hands on her hips and looked at a group of uneasy newcomers in the room. She walked to Fong Mu and pulled his sleeves to complain, "There are only 20 people. My sister is in Yunjing. It is definitely not enough." The newcomers were still guessing Fong Ling's identity. When they suddenly heard Fong Ling say, "Yunjing," they were all shocked. But soon they concealed the shock and continued to maintain a calm appearance. Fong Mu helplessly touched Fong Ling's eyebrows and transmitted the sound in silence. Of course, there are more than 20 people who have been trained. But only these 20 people are barely competent and have been strictly selected for their loyalty. Fong Ling suddenly understood. Luo Yichen also nodded and said, the quality is more than the number of people going to Yunjing. So many people are enough. It is not easy to arrange more people. Ruhan, how about contacting people in Yunjing? Mei Ruhan nodded quickly and said, yes. Sister Shuodong said that we can go there. Tianbao Pharmacy is short of manpower to transport a large number of medicinal materials to Yunjing. They will set off in 3 days. Luo Yichen's eyes flashed. He turned back and said in a deep voice, this is your last test. Within 3 days, you must mix into the transportation team of Tianbao Pharmacy by any means. Yes, Protector Chen. Everyone said in unison, and their eyes were burning. After half a year in that remote place, they finally had a chance to show their talents. If someone can't get in, it means that you are not capable enough. You will not even have the chance to see Mr. Li. Go back to the secluded site and continue to practice. Do you hear me? Yes. For a moment, the shouting became louder. Mei Ruhan covered her mouth and chuckled. These guys were in high morale purely because they were afraid to go back to the secluded site. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her wrist. A familiar scene flashed through her mind. It seemed that she had experienced the same thing a long time ago. Ruhan, Ruhan. Hearing someone calling her, Mei Ruhan came to her sense. She immediately saw a pair of eyes full of concern. It was Brother Luo. She blushed and turned her head. I'm fine, Brother Luo. I just thought of something. Mei Ruhan smiled sweetly. Why did she think so much? Even if there was such a thing as the previous life, she didn't need it. Brother Luo was enough. So, 3 days later, 20 newcomers of the Linli building became temporary workers of Tianbao Pharmacy without exception. Fang Mu also went with them. After all, these people were elites that had been carefully selected from hundreds of people. If there were any mountain rocks along the way, it would be a huge waste. It should be known that the amount of money spent on 20 people in the past 6 months was more than what he had spent. Luo Yichen was unwilling to go to Yunjing because of Mei Ruhan. Haydn had reached the acquired 9th hurdle for a long time, but he hadn't found the opportunity to break through. He couldn't go out. Only he could come out. Fang Mu curled his lips. It was a long journey. It was not easy to be a babysitter. Fortunately, he could see his eldest brother after arriving in Yunjing. Fang Mu's eyes flashed with excitement. After practicing AO sword skills, he also realized the opportunity to break through and successfully broke through to the inborn first hurdle. This time, he must let his eldest brother see that he didn't lose the face of the Fang family and didn't let Miss Su down. Half a month later, the team of Tianbao Pharmacy arrived at the gate of Yunjing. Tianbao Pharmacy was an old industry in Yunjing. Nothing had happened. The gate inspection passed safely. Fang Mu, dressed in coarse linen clothes and dressed like a manservant, pushed the handcart into the city. He only felt a pain in the ass. If he could do it again, he would definitely ask Luo Yichen to come out and have a taste. He ate dry food on the way and almost tasted bland. However, those guys were full of enthusiasm and expectation. They were not defeated by the boredom of the half-month. The handcart of the Tianbao Pharmacy arrived at the back door. The supervisor dismissed the staff. The 20 guys immediately left and then gathered in the alley not far from the Tianbao Pharmacy. Fang Mu came last. He glanced at the newcomers who gathered and quieted down. He looked around and suddenly smiled to the air. Brother Qingning, I am here. You can't avoid me, can you? When did you surpass me in cultivation? Chu Qingning, who was hiding in the alley, suddenly appeared, which shocked everyone. When did a person hide there? They had clearly checked it just now and didn't find anything. Fangmu didn't see his old friend for a long time, so he was slightly excited. He hammered Chu Qingning's fist and said with a smile, "I didn't surpass you. You are the only one who steals wine in the restaurant." Chu Qingning couldn't help but smell it. He immediately scolded with a smile, "You really have a dog's nose. Let's go. We can't stay here for a long time. Let's go back first. When these guys come, I can dismiss the temporary waiters. Ordinary people are really restricted. They even need to be on guard to open an underground addendum." On the way, Chu Qingning came to the two carriages with others and smiled. In order not to attract attention, he had already prepared. One day later, the Linli building in Yunjing City was brand new. The waiters kept shouting at the door. Since the opening of the Linli building, there were many repeat customers. Finally, the business was booming. Xian Jingzhou saw it, but he frowned. He was worried about a lot of things. The business of Zhouyue Winery was getting worse and worse. How could he live in the future? He hadn't drunk the Liehua spirits for a long time. Chengong didn't come, and he had no money to buy the spirits. Damn it. On the first day, he saw that all the new waiters were in the acquired 9th hurdle. On the second day, they all became ordinary people. He was not blind. Moreover, he thought that Ling Qinglan also came here before. The Linli building was obviously an invisible sect. He and his wife were cheated. Besides, they drank their spirits and owed them a favor. Xian Jingzhou was in a cold sweat. Could it be that he and his wife were set up? The more he thought, the more suspicious he was. He didn't study these days. He stared at the Linli building, hoping to find something. At this moment, in the affiliated school of the National Academy, Su Li was quietly reading the AO sword skills in the study. This sword skills had been in her hands for a long time, but she didn't expect that the successor of Jin Qing AO in the previous life, Marquis Sword, rose suddenly. Although she had a little talent in swordsmanship, she seemed to be a little worse than Marquis Sword. However, after several months of study, she finally understood the 4th hurdle of the AO sword skills. When she mastered the true meaning of the 4th hurdle, she even dared to fight against the senior of the longevity realm who was beyond the inborn hurdle. Suddenly, Su Li frowned, and a sense of danger came from all directions. Although it was an intuition, the experience of fighting outside all year round in the previous life told her that someone wanted to kill her, and it was a senior. However, why didn't he do it? There was no one here, only the elite soldiers of the Lord Rui's mansion guarding outside the house. Could it be that he didn't dare? He was a senior above the inborn 7th hurdle, but he was so cautious. Su Li lowered her head, and her eyes flashed. She immediately got up and opened the door. Then the sense of danger disappeared completely. Sure enough. Su Li sneered in her heart, but she ordered on the surface, "Mammy Li, get ready. I want to go out for a walk." The man in the dark heard the words, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. Chapter 205. "Miss, is it really okay for you to go out without anyone?" Mammy Li asked worriedly. "It's not safe in the city recently." Su Li smiled and said, "Don't worry, Mammy. It's daytime now. Don't those terrible things happen at night? I'm just going to the downtown. Nothing will happen." The man in the dark smiled slightly. She was so naive and pitiful. The carriage of the Lord Rui's mansion sent Su Li to the downtown street, and then Su Li got off. She really wandered in the downtown. She looked around as she walked, and touched all kinds of jewelry, but she didn't buy anything. It seemed that the style was not beautiful enough. The man took the bamboo hat and followed Su Li without a trace. He picked up the jewelry that Su Li had touched and looked at it. Finally, he hesitated for a moment and bought a hairpin that he thought was beautiful. Women were really troublesome. By the way, I heard that there is a new jewelry store on the next street. Let's go and have a look. But there is no one on that street. Will there be any danger? Suli said to herself. Sometimes she hesitated and finally smiled. It should be okay to have a look. Then, Suli walked cheerfully to the alley on the left where there was no one. When the man saw it, he immediately showed a ferocious killing intent and followed her into the alley without hesitation. Seeing Suli walking not far in front of him, he quickly approached her without a sound. At the same time, a 3-foot-long sword appeared under his wide robe and stabbed at Suli fiercely. Crack! The sound was wrong. The moment he heard the sword stabbing into her, the man's face changed instantly. He retreated into the downtown without saying a word. But at this moment, there was a slight sound of breaking the air behind him. When? The man in the bamboo hat was slightly shocked, but he was as calm as ice. He forcibly turned around and confronted Suli. Ding! A huge and terrible force attacked along the tip of the sword. The long sword broke inch by inch and couldn't be used in the blink of an eye. It was a precious sword in the man's hand. Suli's face slightly froze. She let go of the force and took a few steps back. She stamped her feet and rushed to the man empty-handed without saying a word. Stupid! The man in the bamboo hat sneered. She dared to rush over without a weapon. She was courting death. The cyan sword in his hand was aimed at Suli's heart without hesitation. His feet flashed and he was about to take Suli's life. At this moment, the bamboo-hatted man's expression suddenly changed. He stopped his attack and frantically retreated. He clutched his chest, the numbness spreading from his chest to the rest of his body. He was poisoned. When did this happen? Suddenly, he thought of something and took out a hairpin with trembling hands. So that was it. Suli chuckled, You dare to pick up the things that I have touched one by one. I really admire you. Don't worry, this poison won't kill you. It will only make you unable to move for 4 hours, and you will recover after a day and a night. But... Speaking of this, Suli's eyes flashed. In my opinion, you are probably a practitioner of the longevity realm, right? Furthermore, I'm heavily injured. Otherwise, I would have been heavily injured from that exchange just now. After saying that, Suli reached out and wiped the bloody wound on her right hand. A green light flashed, and the wound quickly scabbed and fell off. Seeing this scene, the bamboo-hatted man's pupils shrank slightly. He raised his sword and faced it from a distance, and then hung it down weakly. His voice was low and hoarse, Who are you? At this moment, he couldn't wait to go back and kill Wu Lirong first. What an ordinary woman of acquired 8th hurdle who only knew some simple healing methods. She was clearly a horrible female practitioner who mastered the power of Jupiter in the spiritual circle, and her cultivation was not much worse than his. Now he was seriously injured and couldn't even exert 10% of his strength. It was simply a fat meat that came to his door. She also mastered a variety of poison skills and didn't follow the gentleman's way in battle. Even when he was still in the sept, he didn't want to face such a horrible opponent at all. But he was unlucky to meet her in the secular world. Step, 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 Suli walked toward him. The bamboo-hatted man wanted to move, but he was paralyzed and couldn't even speak. He could only watch Suli approaching. Suli picked up the man's right arm with one hand and lifted it 1 inch from the ground. Then she walked along the alley. You won't kill me. The bamboo-hatted man transmitted the sound with difficulty. Suli smiled slightly and took the jade hairpin from his hand. I am suddenly interested in you. Can't I? Originally, Suli always tortured and interrogated those who came to kill her first, and then killed them. But this man was a senior of the longevity realm from the spiritual circle. Besides, he was a man, and he just bought the jade hairpin. It was obvious that he was thinking about another woman. Would a practitioner of the longevity realm do the killer's business? For all these reasons, Suli suddenly had a strong interest in this man. Maybe after sorting out her thoughts, she could let her Linley building have another free fighter of the longevity sword. Why not? Not long after, Suli came to the back door of the Linley building with the bamboo-hatted man, who was confused. It was Chu Qingming who opened the door. Seeing that Suli came here with this appearance and there was an outsider beside her, he was also confused. Then, Xian Jingzhou, who had been secretly observing next door, opened his eyes wide in surprise. Why did Suli come here? Suli, what are you? Before Chu Qingming finished his words, Suli noticed that someone was spying on them. Without saying anything, she took the man in the bamboo hat and came in. Chu Qingming found that the man in the bamboo hat could not move and was held by Suli all the way. Fang Yuan and others followed her to the top floor and looked at each other. They didn't know where Suli brought a man here, just like Luo Yichen before. But this time, the man's condition was much better than that of Luo Yichen, who was covered with blood. Suli took a cyan porcelain bottle from the table and put some water on the man's lips. It didn't take long for the man to feel that his mouth could move, but the other parts of his face were still numb and uncontrollable. The bamboo-hatted man was lifted, and Suli saw the man's face clearly. It was very ordinary. She used the eye skill, but she couldn't see any clue. Was he the one who had done it? Suli frowned and had a guess in her heart. The man's eyes were stimulated by the sudden bright light and burst into tears. At the same time, he also saw the scene in the room, which shocked him greatly. There were 3 young masters gathered here. Including Suli, there were 4 young masters. The number of young masters was not less than that of his original sect. Young masters were also extremely precious in the spiritual circle. Those who could communicate with the heaven and earth and become inborn before the age of 20 were all gifted talents. In the future, they might even reach the legendary realm. Therefore, every supreme youth was a seed that was carefully protected in the true spirit sector. But now, he actually saw a number of young masters, who were enough to cause a big fight in the spiritual circle, gathered quietly in an inconspicuous winery in the secular world. Even with his well-informed vision, he couldn't help but be stunned. Suli had been to the spiritual circle. Of course, she knew why the man was shocked. She was more vigilant. The AO sword skills must not be exposed. Otherwise, under the struggle of several major forces in the spiritual circle, the force she had just established would be destroyed. Thinking of this, Suli teasingly said with a smile, "Killer, don't you want to say something?" Killer. The expressions of Fang Yuan and others changed slightly. This person was the killer who attacked Suli. Why did Suli bring this person to the Linley building? The man snorted coldly. He turned his head and said stubbornly, "Since I am in your hands, you can do whatever you want to me." Oh. Suli slightly raised her eyebrows. She turned her palm and took out the jade hairpin. She squinted and smiled. What about the future owner of this thing? The man's eyes changed a few times in an instant. Finally, his expression dimmed and he fell into a long silence. Then, no matter how Suli asked and how she goaded him, the man kept silent all the time. He seemed to be stubborn and eager to die. Suli twisted her eyebrows and asked Chu Qingming and Fang Mu to take a bath first. She didn't know how long this man hadn't changed his clothes. He smelled like a beggar. Obviously, he was a practitioner of the longevity realm, but he didn't care about it at all. Why should I help him to take a bath? Chu Qingning stared at her. He didn't like to help a man to take a bath. Fang Mu was also speechless. He had just arrived in Yunjing for a short time. Why were the errands so unsuitable? Su Li tilted her head and said, among the 4 people here, only you and Fang Mu have the lowest cultivation. Do you have any opinion? Are you willing to let Yin Shuedong? Thinking that Yin Shuedong would help other men to take a bath, Chu Qingning suddenly got goosebumps. Without saying anything, he carried the man and ran to the bathhouse. Fang Mu looked at him and laughed. Brother Qingning was still as funny as before. Mu, you go with him. Su Li handed over a white porcelain bottle and said, poison the man every half an hour. Don't be careless. Fang Mu scratched his head and took it carefully. He was afraid that he would also be infected with the paralyzing poison. He thought for a while and couldn't help but ask, Sister Su Li, the poison you refined can paralyze for 4 hours. Why do you have to be so careful? Su Li shook her head and her eyes were full of deep meaning. That person is different. Fang Yuan was surprised when he heard Su Li's words. Different? How could he be different? Su Li said that no one could survive this poison, whether inborn or acquired. Could it be, he is in the longevity realm? Su Li didn't hide it. As soon as she said that, the faces of the 2 people present changed. Fang Mu grasped the white porcelain bottle and immediately ran to the bathhouse. Half an hour. No. He would poison the man every quarter of an hour. Facing such a horrible enemy as the longevity realm, no matter how careful he was. The bathhouse had been boiling water all the time. Chu Qingning was angry. When he arrived at the bathhouse, he rolled up his sleeves and directly threw the man who couldn't move into the boiling water. Anyway, the inborn senior couldn't be burned to death. Su Li took it for granted. What did she mean by the lowest cultivation? It really pissed him off. Seeing the man who was still bubbling in the water, Chu Qingning showed a perverted smile. He ran into the bathtub, picked up the man, and said with an evil smile in his ear, Motherfucker, I don't dare to fight against her, but I dare to train you hard. Even if I am tired to death today, I will let you wash a layer of skin. Then, all kinds of voices sounded in the bathhouse. Fang Mu stood aside and couldn't bear to look at it. He thought that if Chu Qingning knew that the man was in the longevity realm, his expression would be so wonderful. After a full hour, the humiliated man was dressed by Chu Qingning. He looked at Chu Qingning with murderous eyes. He couldn't wait to recover his ability to move now and press Chu Qingning to death in the water. Chu Qingning laughed out loud. He felt comfortable after he vented his anger. He looked back and saw the man staring at him. He immediately pointed at his nose and scolded, What are you looking at? If you look at me again, I will throw you into the water and train you again. Qingning, what did you say? Yin Shuedong's voice suddenly came from behind. Chu Qingning's complacent face suddenly became stiff. He slowly looked back and saw Yin Shuedong's face full of grievances. She cried and said, I didn't expect you to be such a person. I will ignore you. Chapter 206. Chu Qingning's miserable howl dragged all the way. Fang Mu looked at the handsome man standing next to the bathhouse with a confused face. He was confused. Wasn't it over? He went to call Yin Shuedong. Was there anything that he couldn't understand? Fang Mu's face gradually became strange. He looked the man up and down. The man finally couldn't help but say angrily, It's not what you think. It's the same as what Brother Qingning said. Fang Mu touched his chin and murmured. Suddenly, the man's face became uglier. Your messy hair and beard were dealt with by Brother Qingning. You really look much younger. But I didn't expect that you are only in your 30s. I really don't understand why you want to die at such a young age. Fong Mu shook his head and reapplied the poison to the man. Then he carried the man upstairs. The man glanced at Chu Qingming and Yin Shuadong, who were quarreling in the corner of the first floor. Chu Qingming was explaining something impatiently. His forehead was sweating, but it made him feel warm. He couldn't help but miss that woman. The more he missed her, the more unwilling he was. It was not easy for him to live until now. He didn't see her. How could he be willing to die? How could he be willing to die? The young man's name was Qingning. Her name was Ning Qing. Even their names were so similar. Did God not want him to die? There was confusion in the man's eyes, and Fong Mu was still murmuring in his ears, "Senior, you should confess. Otherwise, Su Li will not let you die easily according to her character. This is our base camp in Yunjing. After she brings you here, you only have two choices. One is to die, and the other is to join our Linli building." The man's eyes flashed. He tried to assassinate Su Li. Although he was easily solved by Su Li, he once wanted to kill Su Li. Would Su Li accept such a person? Perhaps Fong Mu felt that the man's previous experience was too miserable, so he kept talking all the way. "Senior, although I am living a good life now, a year ago, I was just driven into the barracks with a broken family and almost died on the battlefield. Finally, I fell into the prisoner camp and was saved by Miss Su Li. Miss Su Li and we have an agreement, so we will gather together. Maybe our goals are not the same, but we can help each other and support each other until we have the ability to take revenge." Fong Mu was lost in memories. In the end, he found that he seemed to have said too much. He smiled embarrassedly and carried the man into Su Li's attic. Anyway, this person was going to die. It didn't matter to talk too much with a dead person. Fong Mu didn't know that it was the agreement he just mentioned that made the man's pupils shrink, and his thoughts changed quietly. At this moment, Su Li had asked Fong Yuan to go back to practice. She was alone in the attic on the top floor. After Fong Mu put the man down, he closed the door and left. The fate of the man depended on Su Li's mood and the choice of the man. Su Li raised her eyes, and a golden light flashed in her eyes. She had confirmed that the man had not disguised himself and had been using his original appearance. She picked up the cyan long sword sent by Mu on the table, stroked the sword with her fingertips and looked at it carefully. Her fingertips tapped gently, and the sword made a light sound, like a dragon's roar. This was a peerless sword, much better than the Hongyuan sword that Ling Qinglan brought before. "You are really from the spiritual circle," Su Li suddenly said. The first sentence made the man who was ready to negotiate with Su Li confused. "How do you know?" the man said with difficulty. If the woman knew his identity and told the sect, he would be doomed. "You seem to be very nervous." Su Li smiled lightly, and her eyes were shining. She stared at the long sword and said unhurriedly, "Don't worry. I just inferred from this sword. It is not easy to get such a long sword with the forging technology of the secular world. I am afraid that there are only one or two swords in the treasury of the entire Dehan country. You are obviously an outsider and can only come from the spiritual circle." Speaking of this, Su Li raised her head with interest and said with a smile, "What? You seem to have changed your mind. Don't you want to die in silence?" "I don't want to die." The man turned his eyes with difficulty and saw the jade hairpin on the table quietly. "As you expected, I have to see someone, so I can't die." Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly, and didn't continue to ask this time. She needed to think about how to use the man in front of her to counterattack Wu Lirong. If there was no accident, it must be Wu Lirong who attacked her. She didn't know how Wu Lirong had a relationship with this person, but fortunately, Wu Lirong was not supported by the force of the spiritual circle as she thought, but just a loner who fled in embarrassment. I heard that you have an agreement with your subordinates. Can I make an exchange with you with my life? The man couldn't help but speak first. After changing his mind, he naturally didn't want to be dealt with by Su Li in this way, so he immediately began to actively look for opportunities. Su Li raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, "Your Excellency, your life is in my hands now. How can you exchange it? If you want to make an exchange with me, it's not impossible. How about working for me for 10 years? The man's pupils shrank slightly. Do you dare to use me? Why not? Su Li changed her sitting posture lazily and continued to say, "You should know better than me about the means of people who practice poison. If you still want to continue to attack me, I can naturally poison you for the second time, the third time. If you do it too many times, I may not be so patient, and it's better to let you die directly." The man was silent. What Su Li said was not unreasonable, but as long as he attacked fast enough, Su Li would also be injured. However, he had changed his mind now and didn't want to continue to kill Su Li. That was meaningless, because he knew that Wu Lirong was not a person who kept promises. If there was a better choice, why should he hang on to one tree? "It's not my intention to attack you. It's Wu Lirong," the man said, the deal he made with Wu Lirong before. When Su Li heard the two words, Ning Qing, her heart couldn't help but skip a beat. There was really such a coincidence in the world. In her impression, Ning Qing had always been alone. Every time she mentioned her husband, her temperament would change greatly. However, this matter still needed to be verified. All kinds of thoughts lingered in her mind and then quieted down. Wu Lirong really didn't die. Su Li rubbed her chin and suddenly raised her head to ask a question that had nothing to do with the matter. "What's your name?" The man suddenly froze and didn't understand Su Li's intention. But since he had reached a dead end, he didn't intend to hide it anymore. Without hesitation, he said his name. "My surname is Wen, and my name is Tingshan." "My name is Wen Tingshan." Su Li's expression suddenly changed, and she blurted out, "Are you Wen Tingshan of the Wanjian sect?" "You know the Wanjian sect? You are indeed a person of the spiritual circle." Wen Tingshan's face showed bitterness. This gamble was wrong. The Wanjian sect was offering a reward to arrest him in the spiritual circle and the martial arts circle. He fled all the way and barely escaped to the secular world to hide after being seriously injured. Unexpectedly, he fell into the hands of the people of the spiritual circle. No one would not be tempted by the reward offered by the Wanjian sect. Su Li was a young master, so that kind of reward was more attractive to her. At this moment, Wen Tingshan didn't know that Su Li was thinking about another thing. In the previous life, Wen Tingshan was the head of the Wanjian sect. He had great cultivation and was one of the few big shots standing on the pyramid of the spiritual circle. At that time, she was just a nonentity struggling at the bottom of the spiritual circle. Wen Tingshan was the existence that she needed to look up to. What she did should not affect the spiritual circle. That was to say, Wen Tingshan was so miserable in the previous life and this life. He was not only seriously injured, but also worse than a beggar. She couldn't help but be surprised. This was a big fish. If she didn't catch it, wouldn't she feel sorry for herself? Thinking of this, Su Li decisively said, "Wen Tingshan, work for me for 10 years as the previous agreement. I will help you get through the difficulties and help you reunite with Ning Qing. If you can agree, the agreement between you and me will take effect immediately." This time, Wen Tingshan was completely stunned. Did Su Li know what she was talking about? In the face of the horrible reward offered by the Wanjian sect, she didn't change her expression at all. Or did she look down on the things of the Wanjian sect because of her background? For a moment, Wen Tingshan was completely confused. I'll give you time to think about it here. I'll come back in a day and a night. Suli knew that haste did not lead to speed. She left a sentence and left with Wen Tingshan. At the moment when she passed by Wen Tingshan immediately felt that the numbness in his body receded like a tide. He could move. He looked back and saw Suli close the door and disappear from his sight. There was a deep complexity in his eyes. Wasn't she afraid that he was just pretending to enter the Linli building and kill her? However, she didn't notice the method of detoxification just now. If he acted rashly, he might die very quickly. Undoubtedly, he was very afraid of Suli's poison. So now, whether he should run away and continue to pursue alone or stay. He really needed to think about it carefully. For a whole day and night, no one came to disturb him, not even a person who delivered food. Wen Tingshan seemed to turn into a sculpture, standing motionless in the room. When the morning light shone on his face the next day, his eyes instantly lit up. Life was just a gamble. He had gambled once, so why not gamble again? At this moment, Suli opened the door. She wore a plain dress and her sleeves fluttered. She walked lightly like a fairy under the breeze. Her skin was delicate and her facial features were perfect and delicate. She was like the most beautiful work of art in the world. Wen Tingshan turned around and was in a daze. This eccentric and vicious girl who used poison was so breathtakingly beautiful. Could there be such a perfect woman in the world? Although he didn't want to admit it, she was indeed much more beautiful than Qing. But in his heart, there was only Ning Qing. No matter how beautiful Suli was, he just admired her beauty. It seems that you have thought it through. Suli floated over. Her hair was blown by the wind. She hadn't withdrawn the nothing unusual for a long time. She also needed to take a breath. She took this opportunity to test Wen Tingshan, and the result was satisfactory. Yes. Wen Tingshan calmed down. He said in a calm and firm tone, "From now on, I will regard myself as a member of the Linli building. I hope you can keep the agreement." Suli smiled and her eyes were like crescent moons. She said, "Very good. There is finally a senior of the longevity realm in the Linli building. Give me your hand. I will solve your injury first and then talk about other things." Chapter 207. They sat down, and Wen Tingshan stretched out his wrist for Suli to diagnose. Suli's fingertips touched Wen Tingshan's pulse, and her perception immediately spread to Wen Tingshan's whole body. She was shocked by the severity of his internal injuries. 5 ribs were broken, almost 40% of his tendons and vessels were broken, and his internal organs were damaged and bleeding. It was terrible. In addition, there were more than a dozen breaths left in his tendons and vessels. That was to say, along the way, Wen Tingshan had fought with at least a dozen practitioners in the same realm or higher realm, and he had successfully escaped. With such a serious injury, he could suppress and assassinate her as if nothing had happened. Besides, he still had the upper hand in a head-on fight. Was this Wen Tingshan? If he was in his heyday, she was afraid that she could not defeat him. Suli faintly felt that she seemed to have a great fighter. "Did I scare you?" Wen Tingshan forced a stiff and ugly smile on his face. "You should have thought of this when you agreed with us. The elders of the Wanjian sect are not easy to deal with. It was not easy for me to escape." The Wanjian sect. The people from the 10,000 Swords Pavilion were actually chasing after him. Wasn't he from the 10,000 Swords Pavilion? Suli's expression remained unchanged, but her mind was slightly shocked. Wen Tingshan seemed to have misunderstood something. It seemed that she not only picked up a great senior, but also picked up a big trouble. After thinking for a moment, Su Li raised her head and said, "The self-healing ability of seniors in the longevity realm is extremely strong. Your external injuries have been healed for a long time, and only severe internal injuries are left. The state of your body is really a mess. Any warrior of the inborn realm would vomit blood and fall to the ground in such a situation. It's not wise for you to move with the genuine energy of the longevity realm. You need to stay in bed and rest. Leave the recuperation to me." Wen Tingshan looked at Su Li, murmuring and taking out a piece of paper to write down the prescription. The vigilance in his eyes slowly faded away. At this moment, Su Li really became a doctor, with a focused and sacred look. The perfect combination of a poison master and a pharmacist was like the existence of half angel and half devil, revealing a strong evil spirit. But her angelic appearance made him unable to associate her with a poison master. What a contradictory existence, Wen Tingshan sighed in his heart. On the other side, Su Li also put down the pen and paper. She said with a smile, "Next, we have to ask Protector Shan to suffer for a period of bitter treatment." When Wen Tingshan saw the dense treatment plans on the table, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Then he suddenly remembered something and shook his head. I made an appointment with Wu Lirong to see her within 3 days. My head. Su Li smiled gently. "I don't have anything else, but I have a lot of skulls. I can lend them to you. By the way, I have never met the person who killed my mother. Protector Shan, please introduce me to him." Su Li's tone was normal, as if she was visiting an old friend. But when Tingshan heard that the killing intent was more fierce than a hysterical cry for revenge, he could understand how ruthless Su Li was to kill her mother, but what did she mean by borrowing the head? After a quarter of an hour, when Tingshan put on his original clothes, put on a bamboo hat and stood in the stone room. Looking at a large number of coffins in the stone room, he finally understood what Su Li meant by, "There are a lot of skulls." Su Li pointed to the new 20 coffins and said, "These are the corpse puppets robbed from the Lianshi cult. No matter how you use them, you won't feel distressed. Since you can make Wu Lirong fake her death, it should not be difficult for you to disguise the corpse puppets, right?" When Tingshan nodded blankly. The corpse puppets robbed, he had also heard of the Lianshi cult. It was a top force in the martial arts circle. Such a force should be robbed by Su Li. Looking at the 20 corpse puppets, all of which were above the inborn realm, when Tingshan could imagine how painful it would be for the Lianshi cult to lose these corpse puppets. At this time, Yin Xuedong pushed the door and came in. Seeing Wen Tingshan with a cold face, she said, "Protector Shan, nice to meet you." Wen Tingshan was stunned, and then nodded gently. He didn't know why there was a strange feeling in his heart. When he was called first senior fellow apprentice by thousands of disciples in the Wanjian sect, he didn't feel anything. Su Li, most of the faces of the 20 corpse puppets were injured by hidden weapons before, and they need to be repaired. Only the faces of number 14 and number 16 are intact and can be used for disguise. Yin Xuedong opened a booklet and said. She had a detailed record of the various military arrangements in the Linli building. She was shocked when she saw Su Li refining the corpse puppets. She felt that the skill of refining the corpse was too terrifying. Later, after the rainy night in the Wu family, Yin Xuedong's cognition was immediately distorted by Su Li. With her own ability and profound insight, Su Li easily let the people of the Lianshi cult and the Hehuan sect bite each other. She was so wise. Then I will use number 16. Su Li sat down and made a decision. She asked casually, "By the way, where is Chu Qingning? Why didn't I see him just now?" Hearing the name of Chu Qingning, Wen Tingshan's eyes were immediately brighter than light bulbs. His wolf-like eyes immediately made Yin Xuedong's scalp numb. Enchanting smiled awkwardly and said, Qingning said, he wanted to go out to avoid the trouble. What did he do? Su Li was confused. She really didn't know what Chu Qingning did. But judging from Wen Tingshan's angry look, it was probably not a good thing. Hearing that Chu Qingning slipped away, Wen Tingshan snorted coldly and said in a deep voice, he has self-awareness. Otherwise, even if you stop me, I will beat him up. At this moment, Chu Qingning, who had hidden out of the city, was lying on the crooked tree on the low hill beside the official road. His face was full of bad luck. Hearing that Enchanting told him that Wen Tingshan not only surrendered, but also was a senior of the longevity realm, he was so scared that his face turned green. If he had known that Wen Tingshan was a senior of the longevity sword, he would not have offended him anyway. Feng Mu clearly knew it, but he didn't remind him. I didn't bring any money, so I can only go to the mountain to hunt. I am thinking about how to go back. Chu Qingning scratched his head and couldn't think of a way to deal with it. He could only turn over and jump off the crooked tree. He was about to rush to the depths of the forest. At this moment, a long caravan appeared on the official road. Chu Qingning fixed his eyes on it and immediately saw the flag in front of the caravan from a distance. It turns out to be the cloth shop under the jurisdiction of the embroidery workshop in Yunjing City. But doesn't the cloth shop in Yunjing only transport goods into the city every half a month? The last time they entered the city was less than 10 days ago. Why did they come again? With the help of Chu Lu, they were very well informed. They knew the inflow channels of various forces in Yunjing City. The cloth shop shortened the delivery time. If there was no accident, some people from the martial arts circle sneaked into the city. Tut tut, don't worry. There are still 2 months before the 8th day of the 12th lunar month. Chu Qingning murmured. Suddenly, he fixed his eyes and saw an acquaintance. A young manservant mingled with the shop assistants in the cloth shop kept his head down and walked with the caravan. It seemed that he was tired of bowing his head. He raised his head and moved. Coincidentally, Chu Qingning saw his face. Lin Yanqing. Wasn't he Lin Yanqing? Chu Qingning was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out. How long had it been since Lin Yanqing was exiled last year? Not only was he saved on the way of exile, but he also recovered and could move so quickly. Being stared at by Chu Qingning, Lin Yanqing suddenly felt something. He suddenly turned his head and saw a crooked tree swaying in the wind. He was confused. Then someone seemed to say something to him. He immediately lowered his head and walked with the caravan again. Chu Qingning hid behind him and swallowed. He was covered with a layer of cold sweat. Wow, this guy not only recovered, but also made rapid progress in cultivation. He could even find that Chu Qingning was peeping at him. Which force is it? Their medical skills are comparable to Su Li's. It is not easy for the Wu family to be cleaned up in the city. It seems that there are many ruthless people coming, Chu Qingning murmured and watched the caravan go away. Suddenly, his eyes brightened. If he told Su Li about this, he might be able to get protection from Wen Tingshan. Haha, Lin Yanqing, you are really my savior. Chu Qingning was excited and immediately went back. At this moment, Wen Tingshan quietly left the Linli building. He put on a bamboo hat and took the ball-shaped thing wrapped in rags. He silently walked through the alley and returned to the bungalow where he hid. He was completely silent. He didn't need to do anything more. Wu Lirong would definitely come within 3 days. In the past 3 days, Wu Lirong had been secretly monitoring the affiliated school of the National Academy. Since Su Li went out in the morning 2 days ago, she had never come back. At this moment, the people of the Lord Rui's mansion had sent troops to search the whole city quietly. The news had not spread yet, but she couldn't help being excited. That senior took action. Sure enough, Su Li had no chance to resist in the hands of such a person. As long as she went to the bungalow again, she might see Su Li's bloody head. But she didn't dare. At least not now. Although the senior knew that she faked her death, he didn't know that she had lost the ability to send people of the Wu mansion. If she went there and was exposed, she might die in the hands of that person. The horror of a few days ago was still vivid in Wu Lirong's mind. Fear and viciousness flashed in her eyes. She had to find a way to deal with it. Time went by unknowingly. On the third day, the people of the Lord Rui's mansion had been searching crazily and alarmed the city guards. They gradually intended to expand the search scope. Wu Lirong was afraid that Wen Tingshan would escape directly. Although she was not fully prepared, she still went to the bungalow. As soon as she opened the door, Wu Lirong smelled a bloody smell. Her pupils shrank and she saw Wen Tingshan still sitting in the original position. There was a head wrapped in white cloth beside him. She looked happy and wanted to confirm it, but she was scolded by Wen Tingshan. Wait. Wu Lirong was slightly stiff. Senior, why? Wen Tingshan's eyes were cold. Although he joined Su Li, he still wanted to confirm some things. I have done 2 things for you. When will you send someone to help me find Ning Qing? Hearing Wen Tingshan's cold question, Wu Lirong had already prepared for it. She promised without panic, don't worry. In the 3 days when you were busy killing Su Li, I was not idle. I had already sent someone to investigate the news. Now I have invited all the Ning Qing in Yunjing City back to the Wu Mansion. As long as you show me their heads, I will bring them to you immediately. Chapter 208. Of course. Wu Lirong nodded without hesitation. Wen Tingshan narrowed his eyes and slowly uncovered the rag. Seeing that Wen Tingshan was fooled, Wu Lirong was overjoyed and stared at the head intently. The blood on the head of the corpse puppet was not fresh, but it was enough to deceive a secular woman. After seeing Su Li's beautiful but blood-stained face, Wu Lirong immediately laughed crazily. It's her. It's Su Li. Ha 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 ha, Dongfang Rui. I will let you live in hell all the time. Don't expect to be relaxed for the rest of your life. Hatred and jealousy intertwined on Wu Lirong's face, which made her look like a devil and a ghost. Wen Tingshan felt extremely uncomfortable. He quickly grabbed Wu Lirong's neck. Wu Lirong immediately stopped talking, and the ecstasy on her face turned into deep fear. Senior, Wen Tingshan gloomily said, now, let me go to see Qingning immediately. Wu Lirong covered her neck and struggled violently. Hearing Wen Tingshan's words, she sneered in a low voice, break my neck if you can. I won't let you see the woman named Qingning for the rest of your life. She really burned the bridge after crossing it. Wen Tingshan's eyes narrowed, and he didn't feel guilty about violating the agreement. He slapped Wu Lirong unconscious, leaving her shocked. She had clearly laid the groundwork before. She comforted Wen Tingshan by saying that she found Qingning, and then threatened him with the existence of Qingning. Wen Tingshan cared about that woman so much, so he should be cautious. Why did he slap her unconscious without hesitation? Wasn't she afraid that she would kill her? After the darkness, Wu Lirong woke up from a dizzy state. She looked around and found that she was tied up in a stone room with walls on all sides. She suddenly panicked and couldn't help shouting, Senior. I know I'm wrong. Please let me go. I will take you to the Wu Mansion to find the woman named Ning Qing. Before she finished her words, the door of the stone room opened quietly. Wu Lirong immediately looked over, but when she saw the girl standing behind the door, her joy immediately turned into dullness. Su Li was still alive. Impossible. You little bitch, you are dead. How could he still be alive? The great anger made Wu Lirong forget his own situation and madly abused. Su Li impatiently picked her nails and slapped Wu Lirong's cheek with one hand. Paw! This slap was fierce and resounding. Pft! Wu Lirong turned her head and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her lips wriggled as she spat out several teeth. The sharp pain in her mouth finally woke her up. Her face was full of fear and panic. At this moment, Wen Tingshan, who had changed into clean clothes, came in from the door. Wu Lirong saw Wen Tingshan, who was like a different person, and finally understood that Wen Tingshan had chosen to surrender to Su Li. The head was fake like hers. But why did this silly girl have the ability to make him surrender? She couldn't help showing resentment in her eyes. Su Li's calm voice sounded softly, "If you dare to show such a look again, believe it or not, I will dig out your eyes first." Wu Lirong's body trembled violently. She looked at Su Li's face with trembling hands, but she saw that Su Li still had a delicate smile on her face. It seemed that gouging out eyeballs was as common as eating and drinking tea, which was not even worthy of Su Li's killing intent. "I heard from my protector Shan that you have found Qingning in the Wu mansion." Su Li walked lightly and turned behind Wu Lirong. She whispered in her ear, "Can you tell me about the family background of the girl named Qingning? Are her parents still alive? What's her name?" Wu Lirong's scalp was covered with goosebumps. She was flustered, but she didn't dare to show it on her face. She knew that the Ning Qing fabricated by her was probably the last straw for her to survive. But she didn't find her at all. How could she answer Su Li's words? "Speak." Wen Tingshan's face darkened and he roared coldly. Wu Lirong trembled with fear and cried, "I'll speak. I'll speak. I was in a hurry to find her. How could I investigate so much? I only know that she is a widow." Su Li's eyes flashed, "Where did you find her?" Yes. Let me think." Wu Lirong's face couldn't stop shaking violently. Many places appeared in her mind. Su Li's question completely baffled her. Damn it, this little bitch was as despicable and shameless as her mother. Seeing that when Tingshan took a step forward, Wu Lirong was so scared that she almost peed her pants. She shouted regardless of anything, "It's in Yunjing City. It's in Yunjing City." When Tingshan hesitated. Wu Lirong's words were indeed full of doubts, but he didn't dare to bet on Ning Qing's life. Su Li smiled faintly. Wu Lirong did have some intelligence, but unfortunately, she met Su Li. "Well, if you want to live a little longer, I'll let you enjoy it," Su Li said with a smile and winked at Wen Tingshan. They left the adytum. Wu Lirong breathed a sigh of relief. She recovered her mind and asked. There was a smell between her legs. She was so scared that she peed her pants just now. Her face immediately became red, as if she had suffered the harshest humiliation in the world. "Little bitch, why didn't you die?" When Tingshan followed Su Li back to the attic on the top floor. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Su Li, can you keep her alive for a few more days? Let me investigate this matter, and then, does Ning Qing have a father who is a teacher, Ning Yunji?" Su Li suddenly interrupted Wen Tingshan. What she said made him stunned. Why did Su Li seem to know Ning Qing's whereabouts after one day? Was Wu Lirong lying? Or was Su Li lying? When Tingshan saw that Su Li's words were more credible at a glance. He was silent for a moment and nodded. When I met Qing in Yunjing City, she did say that her father was a pedantic teacher. As for his name, I don't know. Ning Qing had been to Yunjing. Su Li raised her eyebrows slightly. No wonder when Tingshan came here to find her. Ning Qing had already left Yunjing, a sad place. She smiled slightly and sat down at the table. She picked up the brush and began to paint without saying a word. Wen Tingshan couldn't help but walk to the side to watch. When he saw that Su Li only drew a rough outline of the facial features, he couldn't help trembling with excitement. Although it was just an outline, the familiarity engraved in his soul made him tremble involuntarily. Su Li's wrist shook quickly, and she painted very fast. Soon, Ning Qing's current appearance was perfectly presented on the rice paper. Looking at the familiar person in the painting, Wen Tingshan picked up the paper with trembling hands. His eyes, which had never shed tears even when he was seriously injured, were quickly wet. How many years had passed? On the Wanjin mountain, he thought about Ning Qing all the time. He was afraid that Ning Qing had forgotten that he had a new lover. He was full of guilt and would rather she didn't wait for him. No matter how much pain and reason he had let her down after all. How many 20 years did she have before she reached the inborn realm? If he asked her to wait for him, it would be too selfish. Wu Lirong is right about one thing. Ms. Ning Qing has been alone all these years. Like her father, she has become a teacher. If you want to see her, you can go to the Qinghe town in the Qinghe province. She teaches in the Qinghe girls' school. That's all. But I still advise you to wait until you recover. Su Li persuaded him, but Wen Tingshan didn't respond at all. She shook her head and went downstairs alone. Wu Lirong was useless to Wen Tingshan since she gave the news of Ning Qing. Naturally, she could do whatever she wanted. Bang! The underground adytum was kicked open. Wu Lirong suddenly raised her head and saw Su Li coming alone. She slowly approached and suddenly struggled violently. Su Li! You can't kill me. I was your mother's good sister. How can you kill me? How dare you kill me? Where is that senior? Let him come. I still need him. Su Li closed the door and walked to Wu Lirong. She pulled a chair and sat down. She looked very calm. How did you kill my mother, huh? Wu Lirong's breath stagnated, and her sophistry immediately disappeared. Don't talk. Su Li's eyes sparkled and her eyelashes trembled slightly. She pinched Wu Lirong's thumb with one hand and then crushed it. Aw, 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 aw. A sharp scream immediately resounded through the adytum. Unfortunately, the adytum was built according to Su Li's instructions. Even if Wu Lirong's voice was 10 times louder, it couldn't pass through. Su Li seemed not to hear Wu Lirong scream. She still smiled and said, "Don't tell me." She took a handkerchief and wiped her bloody fingertips. Then she gently moved the index finger that pinched Wu Lirong's. Fear immediately climbed up Wu Lirong's sweaty face. She screamed without hesitation, "I'll tell you. I'll tell you. Stop pinching." As soon as Wu Lirong said that, Su Li let go of her hand. Wu Lirong didn't want to live at this moment. She just wanted to suffer less. She immediately told Su Li everything she had done in the past. At that time, I happened to know that Su Yun had a biological sister named Su Yun. She came back to Yunjing once a year to visit her. I knew that Su Yun absolutely trusted her sister. On the night before her wedding, I gathered people to kill her. But her sister really came back. That Su Yu was extremely powerful. She blocked all of my subordinates by herself. I could only watch as Su Yun was saved. Later, the reinforcements of the Wu mansion came. Su Yu was seriously injured and fled. I took people to chase her. Unexpectedly, that bitch. Crack. Su Li's index finger was crushed. Blood splashed everywhere. Su Li's tone became softer. Who are you calling a bitch? Ah. Ah. Wu Lirong rolled her eyes in pain. It was very difficult for her to scream. She said, I am a bitch. I am wrong. I am a bitch. Sully let go of her hand and smiled, go on. If you say something wrong again, it will not be as simple as a finger. Wu Lirong trembled. She looked at Sully with fear in her eyes. Devil. Sully was a complete devil. She was different from her kind-hearted mother. There was no good or evil in her eyes. I thought that I could catch her immediately if I went out of the city, but I didn't know why I didn't find her. Later, I took people to search all over Yunjing City and all the places outside Yunjing City. My people were mixed in the hands of Lord Rue. No one found that a small group of people wanted to kill your mother. But after searching for a few months, I still found nothing. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.